Okay, welcome everyone. This is our Monday, May 18th uh, called meeting of the Forsyth County Finance Committee. We have Commissioners Mills, Cooper, and Brown, CFO Dave Gruen, and County Manager Eric Johnson were the official members of the Finance Committee. And the first thing on our agenda is the adoption of the agenda. And was everyone able to see it? It was embedded in your invitation.
Let me give, if I may, Eric, give some updates on that.
Certainly.
Okay. Of course, first of all, we wanted to get the remainder of the offices scheduled. So by the time we're ready to start through the departments and offices, the sheriff should be on for 1:45. Initially, we had the probate judge right behind, but that didn't work out yet with them. I think they're going to be on Wednesday's meeting. I think perhaps because they wanted to get the individual candidate that's filed to be able to look in on the budget as well. With that, I want to assure the committee that even though you'll see virtually all the rest of our departments on the agenda, it is not our intent or in any way, shape, or form to insist that the committee get through all of these in 1, 2, or 3 hour meeting. We just put them on there because we want the committee to go at whatever pace it deems it needs to do. So whether fast or slow with each one, that's fine. Just that not knowing how far we would get, we didn't want to lose any time either. So we'll move until the committee's ready to end. And then from that point on, the balance of the agenda will go on to Wednesday at 9 o'clock. That being said, a couple other adjustments when we get there. I think Steve Zaring is away this week, and so is Avery. So the animal shelter services and code compliance will be moved to next week, I think on the 26th, as well as fleet and transportation dollar ride will be moved to next week. And with that, I think that's the changes and or just updates on how the agenda can work.
Is there any changes to the agenda?
Other than that, no.
I move we approve the agenda.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So as just a brief introduction, we started this process last week. We talked about the challenge of going into a discussion of the Finance Committee on a budget that starts in January, but between now and then, we know that we're not only dealing with the ongoing impact of COVID-19, but we have the impact of the economy, and I think that Dave would like to talk a little bit more about kind of where we are in terms of revenues and where we'll get more detail on some of that. But I know that over the weekend that we had a little bit newer information come out from the tax assessor's office, and we received a distribution of TAF today. So Dave, you want to do a little bit of introduction about what more we know since last week?
Right, those two items. Starting off with the tax digest, Mary did just distribute her updated tax digest, which has virtually all the adjustments and everything that we knew were still pending with the first release of the numbers. So this is a much closer to where it'll be. Of course, it'll still change between now and the final digest in June. But as of right now, this digest is up 4.5% above the net M&O digest from last year. So it's 4.5%. So we're still clear of the 4% we were estimating. And I don't have the numbers yet, but I do have a request in, and Mary's trying to run the program to be able to let us know maybe by Wednesday how much of that is due to new construction or additions to the tax digest, and how much is from revaluations. Which, by the way, the revaluations is not just from properties going up in valuation. That would also be affected by when someone sells a home and their floating exemption comes off, the price of that would jump up for the next person. So it would, in a sense, it would look like a higher valuation, but it would just be back to where it started with the prior homeowner and their floating exemption. So I'll stop there. That's what we see in the digest now. And any questions about that? 4.5% increase over last year.
I'm guessing it's too early yet to know what the ratio is of residential to commercial, right?
Well, no, I got a breakdown here. I can see where I have to adjust a little bit for this last numbers, but initially the residential is up over 5% in the gross amount. That's not net of the exemptions. Unfortunately, if for those looking for a shift more toward non-residential, the commercial and industrial are virtually flat. The commercial is up a little over 1%. Industrial is down by over 1%. So if anything, it's going to shift the percent back a couple percent toward the residential portion of the digest by the time it's all said and done.
Dave, the sheet that you're looking at, do we have that we can see it?
Well, if I could send it to Steve, if someone can bring it up on the screen, I can send it. I just got it from Mary this morning, and I did save a copy of it. Let me send that to him, and I'll have him see if they can get it up on the screen.
And
You know,
on
I'll forward
Friday, we were given like a sheet that gave us the page numbers that we were going to be on during the day,
Right.
but I didn't, if it was sent today, I missed it.
Well, on the
Did somebody send that today?
it was on the calendar request. If you can go to where that's on your calendar for today at 1:30, you should see a Word attachment there. That's the agenda with the page numbers on it. Let me try to bring up
From
this document.
Sandra?
Yes. Okay, I'm going to send this digest to Stephen, see if he can bring it up.
Dave, you just walked me through how to find the agenda in that
Right. It's right.
email.
It's a Word attachment. The way it looks like in emails, it's just below the first few lines in the body of that calendar invitation when it's accepted.
But not the one that was just sent when when a few of us were in the wrong meeting.
No, it would have been when you got this invitation for this meeting initially at the end of last week.
I think Sandra just sent it again.
Okay. Yeah, she'll send you the Word file.
Thank you, Sandra.
Okay, I'm having trouble sending that file. I got a dialog box open
She just sent it again.
for that. Okay, I was trying to send the text digest file over. Let me see if I can forward Mary's email to them, and then they'll bring it up. Okay. Meanwhile, while I'm looking for that, I'll try to do two things at once here. On the Taft, we see the full impact of a full month under what's occurring with this emergency, with this pandemic, if you will. And that is for April to April. What I did this time was I went back and looked at the April distribution for Taft last year in 2019, and having the two different formulas, I was able to adjust it up for how much we would have received from that under this formula, so I can make a good comparison. And when I did that, what it shows is that the April distribution is down 57.1% from what it would have been with April's sales last year for Taft. So that's, again, a reflection on auto sales that are titled in this county. So different counties around the state may be different. That's what we saw here in the distribution we just received. So down 57.1. Don't know if we can view that yet as a bottom point. We'll see what May is going to look like a month from now. Hopefully that would be good if that was a bottom, and from there it starts to build back up. I think when people know whether they still have a job or not, that'll tell them if they were planning to buy a car, if they're going to buy a car. Those people who are still out of work, I think, will be hesitant to buy the car in any case. Okay, here's Mary's file.
And I just forwarded, Dave, it's the one from yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I forwarded to all of the finance committee members.
Okay. Okay. It should have attachment. It's a PDF file. It says prelim consolidations May 17th. Just send it to Steve and see if he can bring it up on the screen.
And if you look at there are several pages. You have to look carefully. You have to look carefully at the top of the page, because there's a page that shows unincorporated. There's a page that shows the city. There's a page that shows the CID, and I think a page that shows the Board of Education. So just look at the top of each page to see what tax
The one
base
we
we're
work off
looking at.
is number 7. So if you can page through these, they're numbered at the top there in the second line. We use number 7, county, all tax districts. And you'll be in the right place if you see a net M&O digest over on the right, bottom line, if you will, there of just over 13.5 billion. I'm sorry, the new number, that's the old number. New number is a little higher, a little different from that, but it's over 13 billion. There you go. He's got it up on the screen as well. Can you make that larger, Stephen, so we can read it?
That's an eye test.
Yeah. All right, one more. Make it one more larger, and I think we can just about see it. All right, there you go. Over in that lower right-hand corner, here you go, comes up in the light. 15.323 billion. That's the bond digest. Bring it up a little bit more, Steve, to 13 point. Looks like 316. There we go. Is the net M&O digest. We get a little bit more out of it for the bond millage rate than we do for the M&O rate per mill. And see up in that same column, as you get up in the top, it's broken down by residential, commercial, industrial, and so on. That's what I compared to the prior year to see the changes. Let's see.
So Eric or Dave, I'm confused. So when the chamber presents to us, like they have, you know, recruited these businesses and brought, you know, all this industrial or different things in, is there a lag time between when they make that announcement and when it shows up in the digest?
Yes. So they'll announce the value and the jobs, and in some cases, those may take several years to actually come forward. And of course, some of those projects may ultimately not go anywhere. So that's the challenge. They look at announcements, and that's, I think, typical for an economic development function anywhere, probably in the state or the country. But you know, an example of, they had the announcement of the Embassy Suite that's going in at Halcyon, and I haven't looked closely recently, but the last time I looked, you had the foundation and you had the crane, but you didn't actually have. Dennis, you probably go by there more than most of us. Is anything coming out of the ground that you've seen there?
Yeah, they're still working on the foundation as well as I can see. The last time I was by there, so it seems to be, you know, I ought to call up and find out kind of what's the holdup. I mean, the weather's been good, so it's not the weather. So maybe it's not moving along very fast. I'll tell you that.
But that's an example, Commissioner, of a $25 million project that you know, will add to our tax digest when it's completed. But it's been going pretty slow. Now the rest of Halcyon obviously is on the tax digest, so that's been helpful to us. But yeah, they count based on announcements, and in some cases the business may never open. In other cases it may, but it may be adding the value over time and the jobs over time as well.
So like the one that Dennis did in his district for all those, what was Dexter? None of that has come into it yet?
I don't think so. I don't think they had any. They would have had to have it by last December 31st for it to be included this year.
Yeah, that's a good point, Cindy. When all that stuff takes into place, I'm sure Todman was in there somewhere, you know, as a game, but the only thing that ever came out of that was the residential.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, so maybe unless there are other questions. So I think the challenge, Taft is way down. And the question for us is, if people are unemployed, then they're not going to buy a car, and that doesn't come back. If everyone was sheltering at home, then anyone that was in the market this year to replace a car might still be in the market, and we just have to see whether those sales occur now that the dealerships are reopening. You've got great financing options that are being given by the manufacturers, and I saw that the major auto manufacturers are calling their employees back and starting up their production lines. So we're just gonna have to wait to see how much that hit on Taft impacts us versus whether it comes back in a later month.
But didn't Dave tell us on Friday that in the worst case scenario with TAP, it's like $750,000?
For next year, yeah, if we have to back off,
Yeah,
if we have to back off, what was it, over 25%, I think. So yeah, this would have to come back again. If this settles in at a 50% reduction for even next year, that's going to be deeper than anyone would have expected. So yeah, if it comes back up, because we were budgeted so low in TAF to start with, so our budgetary hit will be less, still less dollars we'll receive than what we'd hoped.
well, I think that it would be prudent of us to consider the worst case. I mean, if you're in an uncertain, to me, a car is a luxury. I mean, in lots of, in a lot of people's lives, and if their job is, if a third of our population is unemployed, which is what they keep saying on the news, I don't know if that is the same for Forsyth County, but food and lodging is going to come before a car. If it doesn't, we got some other serious issues to deal with. I just don't think we should bank on spending money that we're likely not going to get.
Yeah, I agree, Cindy. I think as conservative as we can, as prudent, if there's something 50% off, I don't think we need to be looking at spending money that we were going to have before coronavirus.
Right. And Commissioner, just to update what you're mentioning, I got the file in front of me again, the summary. Yeah, what I showed there is a low scenario. Don't know what it's going to be. Scenario C was using a 30% decline. And if next year, if that was what we estimated we would receive, that would be a $750,000 reduction from the current budget for Taft in 2020. So goes lower than 30%. Of course, it's steeper.
Where can we get back to the summary?
I'll have Stephen bring that up to you. Stephen, if you can hear me in the general
I can
fund
pull
summary.
it up on my computer if you'll just tell me.
Okay, it was the I think well, let me see if it's at the beginning of
In
your
the Word
package.
document that Sandra sent was just the agenda.
Right.
And it's got the pages to go to.
Right.
But the summary that we had on Friday, I'm thinking Becky might have sent it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you had the general fund summary. You'd have to get back to that package from Thursday. I'm trying to see if it's in this package here. Now this is going with this agenda. But you're correct. There was a $750,000 reduction.
I found it.
Okay.
If you'll do a search for Rebecca Whitmire, then you can, it'll pull it up and you can go back to it. I found it.
So obviously you don't want to make any decisions, above that point now. But again, we're going to monitor this month by month. We're still going to have May, June, July, August before we get toward adopting the initial adoption of the budget, which you can amend. Even if you've adopted, you can still amend it even to the end of the year. So as we get each month's collections, we might get a little bit of a better picture of what we might conservatively project for next year as a committee.
But Dave, tell me if you disagree with this statement, but if we rock along the budget like we typically do, and we always say we can make those changes, but if we don't target what those changes are going to be, it could really send us where all of a sudden we're like, oh, well, we can't, I just think we need to identify where the likelihood of these changes are going to come from. Right. If we wait till the last minute, we're going to be throwing the budget off, and then we're going to be pressured to just go ahead and approve it, and things will go forward, and we'll be in the same situation we are every year of just really spending all the money up to what's available. And I just don't think that's the right, in this situation, I don't think we should do the same thing again.
Right, and not implying that's what you do. I do agree with the strategy. I think you budget on the low end right now, as I hear you intoning in these meetings. We budget very low right now, and you just don't want to increase it at all unless you're highly confident later on that things are going to come in higher. You're right. You don't want to be in a position where you're budgeted higher and you have to back off of it.
So would our philosophy be safe to say that we're going to budget for the $150 million that we were at the prior year and or limit what the increase would be. I'm just wanting to get a handle of what we're doing. I don't like the idea of waiting 3 months and then making a decision.
Right.
So
I
Dave,
think
do you
we
want to
need to
talk about
plan now.
So
We-
Dave
we can-
had on that summary sheet some information about potential areas for savings, right?
Well, I highlighted the major areas, right, that could be targets. Really didn't I didn't make a recommendation as to which way to cut it, but
Yeah.
but again, the 150 million, Commissioner, I mean, that could be a starting point. I'm looking at the top of that page. At these revenue assumptions, they added 1.13%, which brought up to 151.4 million. Certainly could go back to the 149.7 or 150 million, and that can be our starting point, which means from this continuation budget, we'd have to look at about $1.7 million less than what is here as we're going through these different departments.
So what was the 2019 budget?
That's at the very top of the page, 149,692,067. And the continuation budget had added 1.13% in estimated revenues to that.
Dennis, Molly, what do y'all think about that?
No, I agree with you, Cindy. Plus, whenever you have got here on this, the 3.69 projected increase in property tax, that's across the board. That's residential and commercial together, correct?
Right, that's showing 4.5% right now in the digest we just showed you.
Right, but you've got a projection on here, 3.69, I think, on the
Right.
summary.
Right, so we're under
Yeah.
that. We tried to stay under the 4%.
Yeah, we're gonna, if we make 3.69 from what you just got from Mary Kirkpatrick, we're gonna be doing good.
No, she just gave us 4.5% increase.
We actually have more money on the table than we anticipated.
More than what we had estimated in the
Okay, well,
continuation budget.
I'm thinking of the digest.
Okay,
The thing that keeps coming to my mind in talking with Matthew Ledbetter, was it Friday, is if people don't have the money to pay these taxes, and we can project it and have it in the digest, but if they just don't have the money, and Matthew said every time the economy goes down, they see more and more of that, and then the cost to recover that is even more. So I think there's an area that's also we need to look at.
right.
Being more
One more
Well,
thing to remember, each year recognizing some collections don't come in and it may be much steeper. We use 97% of the digest in our budget. We don't budget 100% of what the digest is. We use 97%.
Dave, let me ask you this. Mr. Mary Kirkpatrick, keep going back to that. But what was the timeline on those numbers? That was through what? Through March? What?
On which numbers? The tax digest?
It was
So
last
just
year,
to
wasn't
see.
it?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
the
it's-
number as of January 1, and she gave us that number Sunday.
Right.
Okay, so that was where we were last year. And that was definitely pre-COVID. So our reality now, and I'm bringing this back up, I know I brought it up before, but there are 3 major commercial projects that have gone kaput that were approved. The Cadillac dealership, the Audi dealership, and the hotel inside the city center. They're not going to happen. So, and that's just the beginning of what we've heard so far. By the time we have our next meeting, there may very well be more. So that's the direction it's going. And I'm definitely with Cindy on this. I think we need to go rock, just as trim and rock bottom as we possibly can, particularly on revenue projections.
Right.
Dave, if we take things out of a capital budget, does that have the same effect on our overall budget?
To the extent that we use current new revenues coming in to cover that. For example, on that summary page again, let me take you to the bottom. You'll see the transfers to capital fund. Can you see the top bottom of that summary page, the general fund? And this is coming out of those current revenues, that 150 million, if you will. We're budgeted right now, the current year, we just repeated it in this continuation budget to transfer $4 million to the capital fund for capital replacements. $1.25 million for the neighborhood identification program and $3 million for facilities, either upgrades, renovations, or if need be, added to the new buildings. So there's $8 million there coming out of new revenues. In other words, they're there every year. You can do that every single year, being transferred over to the capital fund. So to that extent, yes, your operating budget, your new revenues are related to the capital funds. Beyond that, it's SPLOST dollars and bond dollars and impact fees and so on.
So
And then the
Commissioners,
surplus, we transfer over every year from the general fund if there is a surplus.
so that's $8 million that you could cut in the budget just with that. Above that is if you reduce the merit increase, how much you save based on smaller than 4% merit. And then to the extent that you continue down the path, I think it was a 10-year cycle of shifting some of the cost of health insurance to employees, you see the impact of that. So these
So
are
Eric, are you saying, I know Dave just talked about the beautification funds and visioning funds that go to each district. I mean, when you say cut it, like, I'll just use my district, where I've been trying, other than the town center and the linear land sign, I've been trying to save that. So when we do exit 18 and do 369, I'd have some money to be able to do the beautification on those. When you say cut it, you're meaning not just cut the 250 that goes into next year, but you're saying cut all that I've saved throughout the whole time?
No, only the new money. Right.
In fact, you'd carry all the money that you've accumulated.
Right, it's rebudgeted, the 500,000 less whatever's been spent.
And of course, it's not an all or none. So next year you could reduce it from 250 to 125. I mean, these are the options. The other thing is, if you get to January and revenues are looking good because we're past the economic impact, then in January, you know that you actually are in a better position to revise some of those revenue estimates and spend the money. If I can go back to something that was said earlier, I went online to look. The last unemployment rate published for our county was as of the end of March. The next update won't be until June 3rd, but the unemployment rate as of the end of March was 3.5%. So we don't know what it'll be as of the end of April. That number won't be available until June 3rd, but we can all speculate about how much worse it got over the course of April. It obviously got worse, but it was a relatively low unemployment rate as of the end of March, and that was only a couple of weeks into kind of the crisis of things shutting down.
Well, on that, Eric, aren't those numbers better than people that have actually qualified for unemployment?
No, it's not based on who applies for unemployment. This is not unemployment claims.
It's based on what? Unemployment claims? It's not?
It is not. No, it is not based on unemployment claims.
What's it based on?
This comes from the U.S. Department of Labor.
Well, how do they get those numbers? I mean, seriously, what are they based on?
Surveys.
Surveys.
It's
okay. I think we can say that those numbers.
It's statistically significant. As someone who used to work for a federal statistical agency.
Yeah, and we both know how that one works, Eric. Okay, so let's get into the real world now. As far as how many people have applied for unemployment, it is countrywide. It's millions, and in our state it increases by quadruples on a regular basis, and a lot of those haven't even been processed yet. So I think we could look for those unemployment numbers to definitely increase. Dramatically.
And we'll have another statistic in 3 weeks.
Why don't I just make that mine right now, okay?
Dave, did you look at the fleet if we were to raise the 100,000 miles to 125,000, what that might save us?
No, don't have that calculated out yet. That'll be a lot of detail work that fleet will help us with. But
I think the key with that is you're going to have to if you do that, you're going to have to factor in higher costs for repairs. We just upgraded the fleet to try to move away from what we were spending on repairs. So you're going to get the sheriff in a few minutes, but you know, the challenge is when you hold on to vehicles longer, then you end up having high cost repairs, whether it's transmissions or air conditioning systems like that. So
The sheriff was who mentioned that, doing it to me.
yeah,
I mean, he
Well,
brought that up as being a way to save some money.
we just had a national fleet consultant come in and move us away from that strategy. So I would encourage you to stick with the strategy that they gave us. That will end up costing you more in the long run. On the subject of the sheriff, I see that the sheriff, I think, has been on. Would you like to start to talk about the sheriff's budget?
I'm ready.
Okay. In the package, and this will be the only time where we have to jump around. We'll go in order after this. Page 110 is the summary of the sheriff's budget, followed by pages of the detail line items. And I'll give you just a brief summary input of that. Get back to, I was on the page. Let me get back to it. Page 110. Here we go. Okay. Two things. First of all, at the top of the page, you'll see the new request, which the sheriff will comment on, where there's a request for 16 new positions scattered across 3 different functions. Again, I'll let the sheriff comment on those. As far as the overall budget's concerned, the summary budget, the total continuation budget is up 2.3%. Of that, in the operating expense area, that's up 5.86%, or about $400,000. It's a smaller number. Again, the largest expenses of the 52 million, over 42 million is the salaries and benefits for the staff, for the deputies and so on in the sheriff's office, with the 469 personnel. And I will stop right there and let the committee and the sheriff take it from there. I think the sheriff is on if he wants to start.
I am Mr. Gruen.
There you go.
Afternoon,
Thank you.
everybody.
Good afternoon.
Hey,
Hey.
Ron,
Hey, Commissioner Brown. How are you, Colonel?
we're living the dream.
We are indeed, and I will still say Forsyth County is the best place to be. So
You're blessed.
I'm joined by some of my senior staff who are appropriately social distance and masked behind me, looking at a dual screen. Yeah, obviously, when we asked for the new positions, we were not in the same world that we're living in today, doing the things that we're doing today. Those positions are justified and needed, and I'll go through those shortly. Although I'm fully aware of where we're at in today's world, and just like you, I have a fiduciary responsibility to the sheriff's office budget. You have a larger fiduciary responsibility to the entire county budget and the planning process of that, and that's why you're commissioners. So I'm fully aware of the changes that are there. I'll go through a couple of those positions to give you an example. Our call volume is up over 10% from 2018 to 2019. And although 2020 is certainly showing a decrease right now, I think we all are understanding of why that is. We're answering almost 250,000 calls a year right now. We had in 2017, I added no new positions. In 2018, I did add some new positions. 2019, we added 0 new positions. 2020, we added 5 counting a grant funded position. And so fast forward, we had anticipated taking a bite of the apple and trying to do what we needed to do after we had been all our tracking stuff in 2020. Now, none of us anticipated COVID-19 and the challenges that we have today. A couple of things that I would suggest for you, and a couple of reminders for you, is currently in the 2020 budget, there's an offset for up to 5 additional positions that was funded and sat to the side at my request for jail officers. We unfortunately have seen the bell curve kind of change in our inmate population pre-COVID-19. Our head count was running about 400 when In the years past, we were at 350. A year before that, we were around 320. And so we saw a significant headcount. Now, COVID-19 has changed that. Just prior to this, I was about to pull the trigger and tell you that I needed to fund a few of those positions. Our headcount today, because of the lower call volume and the courts and some other things are there, I think this morning was 306. So we've seen a decrease of almost 100 inmates. When we come out on the other side of this, I wish it would stay at that number, but it's not. We were consistently tracking 390s to 410s, and that's going to be a challenge for us. So in the new positions, I understand, and I would make it's just a suggestion because you guys get to make the decision. But that suggestion would be is I understand the need not to approve new positions right now. I understand the need to be cautious and take good, prudent care in how we look at finances and things like that. But I would ask you to understand those and not throw them off the table, but just consider that once we get a solid look at what our revenues, anticipation and stuff would be, because right now there's a lot of unknowns, and I understand that just as well as anybody. I will tell you a couple of things that has to happen. We've got some new schools opening up. We got 2 new schools opening up, Poolsville Elementary and East High. We would need to fund 2 school resource officers for those schools. That's something that I can't undo. But I will tell you this, when we took a hard look at our budget and we looked at the monies that we get as revenues from the school system, here's the thing. I think we can eat one of those positions. I think from my internal budget, from the budget that we had this year and things like that, I think I can eat one of those positions. And when I say that, I think I can internally fund that position. I will need one additional one as we open up, and then in the following year, we'll have to add a second officer onto East High School. But because they open up without seniors, that won't be such a big thing. The other thing is our jail head count, assuming that it's going to go back to that curve that we were seeing consistently with a higher head count, I'm going to have a couple of more jail officers as we add in some mental health stuff and we add in the RSAT program that we have a grant. But again, I will tell you this, there's an opportunity to do that out of the jail fund to offset salaries for that. And so internally, I think I can eat those positions as well out of the jail fund. So those are 3 positions going in, and we can staff those SROs quarterly. We don't need the money up front. I don't need to do that, but I'm saying I'll do that internally as well. And that's why I can handle that. I will need to fill those positions for new positions. I want you to understand. School resource officer, jail with the new programs. But again, with the jail, I think we can fund those out of the jail fund, which won't be any additional impact into your 2021 budget. And then I can fund the school resource deputy. And then I would need some help in funding the second one, but that would be, let me look here for 1 second. Would be in July. So you're only talking about a half salary for 1 school resource officer. The rest of the things that we can do, I can self-fund, if so to speak. When I say I can self-fund, it's all taxpayer money, but we're talking about budget to budget.
So Ron, just a question, so the school system doesn't pay for all the school resource officers?
Oh, no. But I will tell you this, when I took office as sheriff, the school system budgeted $287,000. That is roughly what they paid us to offset the school resource officer program. Today, they pay us $1.5 million. That was a negotiation that Dr. Beard and I had post Parkland High School shooting, that tragedy that happened down in Florida. When we did our school safety, we added 11 additional SROs, and they also agreed to help fund some additional. So when you do those numbers together, they funded more than those 11. So we saw an increase of about 500% plus of what they were contributing to what they are contributing now. So they do 1.5 million annually right now. My total cost is somewhere about 3.5 million for school resource officers. But that is part of the responsibility I have as sheriff. So I'm grateful for the partnership we have, and that has greatly offset what we have to do.
Eric, I think we ought to have that we ought to better highlight that. I mean, I don't think that I mean, it's taxpayer dollars, whether it's paid for by the BOE or,
Sure.
or BOC. But I think that when we're doing our tax bills or when Karen's, you know, putting out those things to the public, that people need to be made aware that of the so many school resource officers, the county is paying for it, you know, out of the county's budget.
Yeah, I guess my question is, Sheriff, as they add, why aren't they picking up the cost to add? I mean, I appreciate how you move the needle so much in the aftermath of Parkland, but that's a cost associated with them opening new facilities. Why
Yeah.
do they have us pick up the cost of providing a resource inside a school as opposed to them picking up that cost?
So when we looked at the 287 they were giving us, and then looking forward at the 1.5 million, the first 2 years helped pay for cars for the school resource officers.
Sure.
That was the agreement that I had with them, and that we budgeted out how much the officers cost. We budgeted out how much capital equipment would cost and those kind of things. Those cars last a long time with school resource deputies. And so what we're able to do now is that's why I said I can use the term eat one of those positions that we have to have. That's out of that 1.5 million. My next conversation with them will be after East High School, after the one officer that goes there to begin with, starting in the second, and then there's an additional school that'll be open, I believe, in 2022 opening. Then we're going to have a sit down talk about, as you said, operating costs as they open new facilities, of being able to increase that 1.5 million. But right now, with the agreement I had with them to add the 11 plus the capital, removing the capital, they basically are paying for all those new positions. That 1.5 will take care of that.
But they're not paying for the ones that you're asking for now.
No, that's going to come out of the 1.5 because initially that was for an annual capital, and we're not using the capital for it this year. And I understand the need to have that conversation, and that conversation will be forthcoming, but it's not yet.
I do agree with what Eric's saying, that you can't go back and change, and you have done well to move the needle, but you can't, but it looks like that there needs to be an agreement in place. From this point forward, every school you add, that ought to be figured into the budget.
Well,
They'll go back to Matthew getting paid that money for, you know, they always bring that up.
Well,
That the tax commissioner fees, that always gets brought up.
That's going to have to be an additional conversation, and I agree that can be an amendment too, but that's going to have to be that's the Board of Education and myself coming to that agreement with doing that. But that's where we've got to have that conversation. I'm not bashful about having it. Like I said, we went from 287,000 to 1.5 million. So again, we have moved the needle. I agree. Our school system's not slowing down. We can't continue to self-fund that. They're going to have to help. They've shown they have shown nothing but willingness to work with us on school safety and do those things. It's been truly collaborative. And so I don't think I'm going to get a whole lot of pushback as we move forward on this.
And it is good to note that when the schools weren't in session, that you were able to use those deputies to help you with the COVID thing as well. So I can balance that and saying, well, it's good that the county puts in some money toward those officers if they're used for other things than just the school.
Yeah, they're our Marine Patrol, our bike patrol, and when we had some officers out that were positive with COVID-19, they were able to fill in, and we didn't miss a beat at the sheriff's office, even when we had 9 or 10 people out at one time. So it's worked really well for us for that. You know, the 8 positions we asked for uniform patrol were the additional growth that we are seeing, again, to keep. You've got the lowest crime rates of Metro Atlanta because we've got a really good sheriff's office and a really good citizenry that works together. And we're finally at that point we need to increase and add. And when we finally do get to a central precinct, that personnel would just be sucked away and create a central precinct. I realize that it would probably not be a prudent thing to approve those 8 positions at this moment and do those kind of things. And so I'm not even asking, but I would ask you to sit it to the side for consideration once we see where our revenues are. The things I have to do as a school resource officer and the jail head count for the jail RSAT, Regional Substance Abuse Treatment Program, that we are on a state federal grant for. And again, I can fund those out of the jail fund That's an agreement between the county manager and I, that it has to be reached between the county manager and I, but I could fund, and luckily those positions come with very little capital expenses. They don't need cars. They don't need things like that. It's basically just salary, wage, benefit for the most part. The rest of it I can absorb in our internal budget.
So how much can we reduce? I know you're saying is it 8 positions total that we could reduce and
So
possibly get it in July?
So in the new stuff, what I would suggest, again, respectful, what I would tell you is there's 8 uniform patrol deputies. I'm not saying that I don't need them. I'm not saying they're not highly needed here. But what I am saying is I understand that you have a need to be careful of what you're doing. Those are the 4 deputy sheriffs for South Precinct, 4 deputy sheriffs for North Precinct. I would ask you to table those to the side and let me bring that back for reconsideration once we know where our revenues are. Okay. The 3 deputy sheriffs first class, it says special detail. Those are SROs. I need to fill 2 of those, 1 in January, which I said I can fund internally, and 1 in July, which is I'm going to need your help in funding. And then there's 5 deputy sheriffs for the detention center. Remember, you've got an offset that should be set aside money this year for 5. This was going to be that same 5, if you will, if I had not filled those. What I'm saying right now is let's fill at least 2 of those and let me fill those out of the jail fund.
So Dave, are you getting all this?
I think I got it.
So again, I'm not suggesting that we eliminate the request. I'm asking that you consider postponing that request or let me bring it back to you for reconsideration for those other positions once we see where our revenues are.
Ron, this is just a curious question, and I know our grant's paying for some employees on the mental health side, and I just think it's wonderful what you're doing, just wonderful. All with Terry and everybody, but I also know that, there's things that are going to happen maybe unexpectedly that you're going to need some flexibility on. I know that drug seizure money can be used for programs. Is there any flexibility in you having that ability to use those funds for inside the jail for, like, when we start trying to bring in counselors for drug, for therapy or whatever that we decide or y'all decide needs to be done?
In a jail setting, it's gonna be difficult, likely with the restrictions on federal. I'll have to double check on that. I know in external programs I can, but there's such significant restrictions on those drug seizure funds or those asset forfeiture funds. I don't know inside of a jail if that is going to hit or not. Again, being blunt with you, I don't know 100% the answer. I'm leaning towards no based on what I do know, but that's a unique, specific question that I've never asked before. Our asset seizure funds, I'm very careful of how we spend those, but I'm also anticipating having to make a large purchase out of those as we continue with the range complex. When we sent it out to RFP, and what we got back was literally twice the amount of what we anticipated. So I'm anticipating having to make a significant deduction from those asset seizure funds to help pay for the range. But it doesn't mean there's not some opportunities there. I think the biggest thing to tell you is that we currently have reallocated a position, and we're looking to hire our own grant writer, grant coordinator. And I hope that's going to give us some opportunities to do some of the things you're talking about, but hopefully grant funded more so than being able to write something out of asset forfeiture.
I just thought that might be an option, especially if we can't find a person that we might be able to use a company, and that drug seizure funds might be able to help. To me, that makes perfect sense because you're putting it back into the people to try to help make them not have to come back to jail. But I understand it's
Not,
It's
not
very
equipped
detailed.
to use it for drug treatment and education. The question is, can I use it in a jail setting? That's the question. So moving ahead, I'll make a couple of things, a couple of quick statements to you. Look, I pulled my staff together and I want to make sure we're doing our part and we look at everything. We've done a really good job this year. I'm really proud of our staff and what we've done in being able to really stretch the capital and SPLOST money that we had. We bought way more sedans than we bought SUVs this year. I was able to reuse a lot of equipment and do some things. So we've made some really smart financial moves as it comes to cars this year. So we sat down and took a hard look at where we're at in our cars. And to Mr. Johnson's point, he is correct. Look, if you've got to save money for 1 year, you can extend the life of cars, but you're going to pay for it in the following years. I'm seeing that right now. We had 40 cars on the way from Dodge, but obviously they've been delayed and we probably won't get them till late fall, early fall, something like that. And we're already starting to see cars that we're replacing engines and transmissions in, which gets really expensive. So yeah, in a long run, you can do it, but you're going to pay for it in year 2 and year 3 once you enhance how long you run cars. But going back to my point of good financial decisions we've made this year, we looked hard at how many cars we need to replace based on mileage, based on cost, based on everything else. Tentatively, we have 1.0 something, just over $1 million in capital. That is for car replacement. We have additional monies for SPLOST. When we ran that all together, I literally, and my folks cringe because I'm making them tighten their belt as tight as they can. I think we can reduce. I had hoped it would be more, but I think we can reduce our capital by $200,000. That's going to get us still within. That's about closing in on 6 police cars we'll cut down on. But we've done such a good job this year. I can go with 6 or 7 less next year. But that gives you another $200,000. You were talking about your Taft and 750. If you reallocated that 200 that was going to go to us in capital, that certainly takes a bite out of that for you.
What about I know that the wish list is for you to have a new headquarters and a precinct and us to be able to build. But I think when we talked the other day, you understood that this might not be the right time to do it right now.
Sure. You know, I know at least the latest discussions I had was, you know, the county is so space constrained in our off spaces and things like that. You want this building back, and again, it's your buildings. You make the decisions to put magistrate court and other things like that. And I get it. If we're going to build a new county administration building, if we were to take over the old one, precinct and a headquarters in the same building, so it's a one building cost and do this kind of things. But look, we can operate where we're at as long as you tell us. You give me 4 walls and a chair, I'll make the sheriff's office work. So I understand we're not pushing at all for a new facility. We'll take hand-me-downs as long as we can continue operating and keeping the county safe.
So I think a key with that is if we can build an admin building, we get 3 items off our list, because with some renovation, you're able to move in, use the admin building as a sheriff's headquarters and as your central precinct. So
that's correct. We've
really been talking about building 1 building, not 3.
Yeah, we could certainly make that work. And I think as you and I had discussed, and a couple of commissioners and I have discussed, I think our renovations, other than security entrances and stuff, would actually be really, really small in that building. And I know that's a future discussion, but realize I don't think it would take a whole lot of money in renovation for us. You just went through a renovation of that building. I don't think we would have to change much at all.
I think we actually have some leftover SPLOST money from an earlier SPLOST that can be spent on the building too.
Yeah. So, but again, I think we can do from that. I think in capital, we could do that. Look, at the end of the day, we can spend some additional money. And I guess that this kind of comes a question for the county manager and then the commissioners to decide on. Look, I've got about $600,000 in the jail fund. Now I'll remind you a couple of things. One, the last 3 years, we've given back $2.6 million about. The other is that we had agreed to spend out of the jail fund for the COVID hazard relief pay that's out there. We anticipate that's going to be about $100,000. Now I told you I would fund 2 jail officers out of that with the county manager's approval. That's between he and I, but that's about about 140,000. So there's 240. I've got 600. We average about, it's obviously down right now. We average about 20,000 a month coming into that. So that leaves us, somewhere in the neighborhood of 360 in it right now. Instead of capital money, I certainly can offset salaries of jailers with some of that money. But I'll kind of the same thing as cars. I'm just giving you all the information for you to make a decision or give me a recommendation, because the fact is, if we exhaust that jail fund completely and something happens in that building, we have another fire, we have something else, we have something break, it's a county building. Right now I can use jail fund money to help fund changes in their infrastructure, whatever needs to be done. If that runs out, then I have to come back to the county, and it comes out of county building fund, or probably not the right choice of words there, that comes back from the county general budget. But I think there is an opportunity for maybe do 100,000 out of capital and do another 100,000 out of jail fund, or 150 out of jail fund. Just realize the more we suck that down, that it could leave the opportunity that there could be something happening there that's unknown, something unanticipated. We don't have anything majorly anticipated for building or construction over there right now. But there is a little bit more money that I think we could use out of that if that's something that you want to do.
Yeah, Sheriff,
Ron,
one
let me
thing.
ask,
Go ahead, Cindy.
if looking at this little square in the book of your budget, the last 2019 actual and the 2020 adopted, if we were as a board to try to go back with the same budget for right now for 2021, the adopted, not the actual, do you think you could make your numbers work under the 2020 adopted budget numbers? If we were to try to base a budget on that? You don't have to answer right now, but could you look at that?
Well, let me give you a couple of quick things. In our 2021 budget, look, our operational budget is actually decreased from 2017. And we're only showing about $100,000 increase in what we call our operational budget. Realize that when you do a 4% raise, I'm not saying they're not well appreciated, they're not well deserved by the public safety officers. That's over $1 million for us. We had to up our inmate health care because it was scheduled on 325 inmates, and now we're doing about 400. We also had to up our inmate meals. So those are things that are those are non-discretionary things. By constitutional law, by court ruling, I have to provide medical care. I have to provide meals to inmates, and I can't cut those things. And so when you say that, if you take away those things and the 4% and those things, you would find that our budget is completely flat. So now what you theoretically are saying is, how much can we cut off where we were last year? And I just, as I said, we just talked about, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of just of cuts to another 200,000 or 300,000. So that would be very difficult to get back to that and keep the increases that are mandated with a 4% salary and the inmate wellness, i.e. medical and inmate meals. That would be very difficult to do.
Sheriff, I wanted to go back when you're talking about the jail fund. One of the things that we've discussed before is, I think you covered it very well, is the notion that if you needed to open another pod within the jail, that the jail fund gave you the opportunity to cover that cost for the balance of the year without coming in and asking the board mid-year for additional funding. And
Great.
so whether you keep that enough money in the jail fund to cover that type of a potential, or we draw it down, if we draw it down, we just need to be prepared for the fact that should you have the inmate population go up and need to open another part of the jail, that you would need money on short notice from general revenue to be able to cover that.
Well, and again, I'm not trying to play the shell game with money. is there's 5 positions that should be funded and set aside as a reserve in case we needed them. And that was approved by the board last year. I didn't want to ask for 5 positions that I didn't know that I was going to need, but it was kind of a hedge in case our inmate head count went up. Well, it did. Well, it's down now. Well, depending on what we see as a recovery and what we see as inmate numbers, I may not need those 5 positions this year, right? So to your point about the jail fund, those are not funded from the jail fund of those 5. That was budgeted money, but not included in my budget, but set aside as a reserve. If I don't use those, that's about $300,000+ that somewhere in a reserve is sitting aside that I'm not going to be using this year. That certainly I would imagine some poor version of vocabulary could roll forward to next year as well for general budget, not even for the sheriff's office.
Thank you.
That's why I thought, Ron, with all the things you were talking about, I know you want to be able to go back and revisit, not just do away with the positions, but go back and look later at the 8 to be funded, that it's really only, and you were talking about cutting out the 300,000 or so in capital, but it's only $1 million difference between the two. And we've got to decide about raises. You know, we sure don't want to do a salary study and get people caught up and then make a decision that's going to get us back far away again. But at the same time, I don't think it's written anywhere that every year we have to do a 4% raise. You want to, you hope you can.
No, and I think, again, just like I have to make decisions here from a fiduciary responsibility, you have to make them from the larger responsibility that you hold as sitting commissioners. And I don't envy that position that you have when you have to make those kind of decisions, especially it's easy when there's plenty of money flowing in, right? Except I'll remind you the same thing I tell my staff each and every time we talk about money. It's not our money. We take it from people. Government doesn't ask and we take it. We tell people they have to give it. And we should be using it as wisely as we can because we didn't ask them, could we have it? And that's not some kind of lesson for our board of commissioners. I've shared that with you before. That's just the analogy of how I approach spending taxpayer dollars. So, you know, Commissioner Mills, like I said, when you talk about from the jail fund, there could be some additional money taken out of the jail fund. We talked about $200,000 in capital. I talked about funding these other positions internally or through the jail fund. So you basically are talking about most of our new initiatives, except one school resource officer, not costing anything additional and being able to cut another 300,000 or so. You know, it's getting there, getting to where you need to be.
I think that Dave and his staff just needs to sit down with y'all and look at it more closely again, and then see if we do develop a contingency budget, you know, for best case scenario and things don't go as bad as we think, then this is the column that we look to try to fund later.
And I agree. And that was my first ask in the beginning of this was, please don't throw it off the table, put it to the side as we did this year. I've done everything I can to try to prove to everyone. And I think we all have a good enough working relationship that, you know, I don't waste money. And that's why I asked to sit the 5 off for this year. I could have asked for them in my general budget. I could have asked for them. And I think with the revenues at the time, you probably would have given them to me as justified. But I knew there was a chance I didn't need them. I didn't wish it was anticipate or believe it would have been because of COVID-19. But I asked you to set it to the side. And I told you I wouldn't spend the money if I didn't need it. And so now we have it. So the same thing I'm basically same ask here is sit it to the side. I think everybody understands why we have to have school resource officers. I think you understand with our jail head count increasing, and I'm talking about how we fund that internally through the jail fund. But the other additional officers, I understand. I would, if I was in your shoes, I'd be blunt with you. I wouldn't approve them at this point either. I wouldn't want it. We're early enough, and unfortunately in the middle of budgeting, that you just don't have great great forecast of where we're going to be 3 or 4 months from now.
Ron, while we've got you in this setting, we don't usually have this opportunity often, but as far as raises go, and you've got a big, huge part of our county employees are under your direction. What do you think on, I mean, if you were wearing the BOC hat, I mean, if we were to be able to cut, I mean, what's your feelings on raises?
Well, I think you made one point, Commissioner Mills. I think Mr. Johnson had kind of was headed there, and I don't want to put anything in any words in his mouth. Is we did a pay study and we were trying to make sure that we didn't fall behind. But I also realized that there are people in the private industry world that probably aren't getting raises this upcoming year. So you have a couple of options, and I'm not mincing my words here. What you could always do is maybe consider having that to 2%. This is just a thought, but I'm kind of fiscally sound in how I look at things. I believe maybe look at a 2%, and then you can always look at a mid-year adjustment in 2021. So fiscal 21 come June, you could always look at whether or not if we've recovered the way we all hope we recover, and our revenues are good, our county is strong, and things are going well, you could always look at fixing that and going back to the 4%. You know, as I said, 4% across the board for South County Sheriff's Office is a little over $1 million. And so, you know, when you see our budget increase, you do that 3 years in a row, that just by itself is over $3 million. And again, revenues are coming in, those kind of things, but maybe that's an opportunity to save another $1 million. And then you can always, if you don't need it, in other words, if the funding is there and you think it's the right time, you could do that. So maybe that's an opportunity.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Sheriff.
Mr. Johnson, thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
Well, commissioners, thank you. Hey, there you are. I've been seeing screens. I couldn't see any of your faces. Look,
Ron, when does your shooting range going to open? Do you know?
We just went back out, or in the process of going back out with a more limited scope RFP, because again, it came in significantly higher than what we anticipated. So we're going to have to kind of phase this thing in. And, you know, as I said, I'm looking at potentially having to write a $200,000 check in asset seizure funds just to make it happen. So again, that would be a good use of asset seizure funds for law enforcement training. But I think from that standpoint, we'll know soon, and when the RFP goes back out. And so we're trying our best to make it happen. I don't envy what you guys are doing. Thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for looking out for us here in Forsyth County. And I'm certainly on board with you. I hope you know we're going to try our best to do our part in this, and we're praying for a rapid and full recovery and a strong Forsyth.
Thanks,
Thank
Ron.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, if the committee's ready, we'll go back toward the beginning and work through the various county departments and other functions, pretty much in order, except for any that we have to skip who aren't here today. Back on page 21, we start with extension services, and I think I saw Heather on the line, should be available.
Yes, I'm here.
You there, Heather?
Yeah.
Very good, thank you. I'll give a brief summary for the committee. There are no new items requested. The budget that's requested here, brought up to date, is an increase of 2.56% at the $248,841. For the committee's knowledge, where most of the funding you see here is under what we call operating expenses, that's because all but a little bit of part-time hours for the office help is through a contract with the university as part of the cooperative arrangement with the university and with the Board of Education. And so they give us what that share of it is for the positions that are serving in this county. And that's what most of that $200,000 is that you see there under operating expenses. The reason why you see a big increase from a prior year, I'll point out that there were some vacancies in that and they had to fill some positions. Heather can bring up to date on that. And I think last year the county did approve adding 1 position. And with that, here's Heather from Cooperative Extension.
So yes, we did receive an additional position, the horticulture educator, which was filled in March. So that is a big chunk of the increase. The only other change is the trying to keep the employees that are on contract up and equal in their pay to the equivalent positions in the county.
Any questions?
Heather, do y'all do anything with the school system with their agricultural programs now, their farm to table, or all the greenhouses that the Rotary Club has helped put in? They're not just in North Forsyth. We've now added some. I know Mashburn got one. Maybe Sony's got one too. Anyway, I just wondered if you work with the school system at all.
We work with the school system quite a bit. In the 4-H program area, we do agri-science and school garden curriculum in the elementary schools that we're in, where that's requested. A lot of them still want the CCRPI curriculum, but that is one of the roles that the new horticulture educator was requested to fill. So one of her primary responsibility will be to support the school gardens, to do teacher education and advisory, to do STEM programs with the school, which we do now, but we can't meet the current demand. Right, well, of course, right now we're all doing online stuff. But yes, so Shannon Kennedy, our horticulture educator, will be working with the schools that have the school gardens, that have the high tunnels. I am also on the advisory committee for our high school agriculture programs.
Yeah, I could see where y'all could be very instrumental in that. You know of any, and you can send me this information if you have any, but we've been working with the school system on trying to get a cannery at North High, and to go sort of culminate all these greenhouses and what they grow, and for the community to be able to use, because we don't have a place, and people that are canning all their, that doing their own baby food and doing all these other things, it could be open to the public. See, through your organization, do you have any grant opportunities for that?
Not through extension, but Angelia and I did sit in on the USDA webinar that there were 2 tracks that it was dealing with. It was for local agriculture development. The farmers market promotion program was one of them, and the local agriculture marketing program was another. I had thought from a previous grant that I had read from years ago that they did fund some capital projects through this. That was not what we got out of the webinar that we did last month. It was more along the lines, they will fund studies, they will fund feasibility studies, they will fund marketing programs, kind of things like that. So when we came out of that, when we discussed it, we said probably the best thing to do would be to come together with a project planning committee and see if we can't come up with a proposal to apply for that, maybe a feasibility study or some other kind of grant, and put that into the March 2021 application process.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure it was on your radar.
Absolutely.
Are you still loving your new building?
Well, when we get to it, there are only 2 of us that are spending any time in it these days. But yeah, before we had to shut down, it was very, very helpful for doing a lot of different programming. We had a lot more freedom to just schedule and go with face-to-face programs. We have been doing a lot of webinar programs now, and actually we're meeting an audience that we had not connected with before. So we'll continue to do that, but we are all looking forward to getting back to face at some point.
You know, it might be, Heather, you could be like if you have the staff, a coordinator to bring in some of those master gardeners to help in a more of a mentor role with the greenhouses as well. I know our Rotary clubs work with Captain Planet, the Ted Turner Foundation, and we brought in, they have a STEM curriculum that we've paid for to go to some of the schools too. I just think that sometimes those young kids could learn a lot from the master gardeners that have been growing forever.
And we have done some of that. We rely on the schools to ask us for it rather than going into it, into what they're doing. But yes, we definitely love working with the schools.
Any other questions?
No.
Dave?
All right. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up on summary page 23 is the library. I believe Anna Lyle should be with us online. Let me give a few words of explanation. There's a different arrangement with the library since they're pretty much independent with their own board, but the majority of their funding comes from the county for the library system. What you see in this summary page, the bottom, is not much of a change at all in the budget, just a few internal expense accounts that we pay directly for them. You'll see the other cost line which says $7,047,912. We make no assumption in changing it. That's the agreement with the library. It's paid to them 1/12 each month through the year for their operational libraries. All the changes that would be requested or affect this budget at the top of the page. I'll let Anna go through most of these. Just one I want to explain about the merit increase. At the top, you see one about the bookmobile operations and adding a full-time outreach specialist. We look at that as revised service level and the current service level. At the bottom of that section at the top of the page, you see the upgrade of a few part-time positions, some increases in operating expenses. I'll let her comment on the implementation of the compensation study they did. But you'll see their line says 4% merit increase. Just wanted to highlight here, and Anna knows, let's make sure we have this before the board so they're aware of it. Whatever the board decides to do with any compensation increases for the county employees, whether it's 4%, 2%, or whatever, we have not added that in below in the continuation budget like we do on the salary lines across the county departments. So if the board, for example, here did a 4% increase, there would be a request here from the library to do the same for their employees, which would amount to $211,633, roughly $50,000 per 1%. So just want to make the committee aware that that's there, that wherever we end up in compensation increases, there would be some funding needed by the library added to their agreement line, their contract line, if you will, to do the same thing. And with that, Anna, if you're online, I'll let you talk about the other items.
Okay, thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. So, as Sheriff Freeman said, we're in a similar situation in that the music is not coming from me. When
Music.
Someone put us on hold.
All right, I'll continue.
Stephen, can you please mute caller 16?
When the library board approved this request for us to bring to Forsyth County, it was February and pre-COVID. And so I'm sure you'll hear a lot of people say today, as the sheriff did, that we certainly understand that things are a different situation and we made this request. I do, however, appreciate the opportunity to be able to kind of walk you through what we're looking at. And I know what was discussed in our individual meeting with the finance department was the possibility that if things turn out to be better than expected, if revenues come in more than it looks like they might, that hopefully some of these items could be added later. So up at the top of the page, the revised service level, in the current year, beginning July, the county is funding half of the cost of an outreach specialist to work with, excuse me, I'm sorry, the bookmobile operating costs you see there, that includes half of a part-time position. The other half is already funded in the current calendar year beginning in July. And that is a part-time person for our bookmobile, which we still are on schedule to receive towards the very end of the summer and to roll out in the fall. We don't know how COVID will affect that, but we are studying all options for that. So you've actually already started funding that portion. So that's requesting the other half of that. And then the additional full-time outreach specialist was after we had our community retreat about the bookmobile and saw, really had a full understanding of the incredible demand we were going to have. We determined we really could get a lot more use out of that investment if we had another staff member to staff that. So again, we don't know what the exact situation with the bill will be now. We do know that once we're past COVID, that's going to be a very, very popular service, and it may even be that it's ideally suited in some ways to deal with the COVID situation. Under the current service level, we are continuing to request some part-time positions be transitioned to full-time positions. In the current budget year, you helped us upgrade 4 part-time positions to full-time positions. And basically what we're trying to do is move 25-hour positions that are still kind of a hangover from the last recession to full-time positions, and the major cost difference being really that they would qualify for health insurance, which for library staff, we're with the state health benefit plan, and that's $10,116 per year per staff member. And then the other part of that, of course, is just the salary cost. We had a miscellaneous request for increases in operations. We tend to come to the county with new initiatives or big changes, and we had just a list of things that creep up over time. For example, IT maintenance costs going up about, perfect, thank you for Stephen or whoever's displaying that. So we just have odds and ends expendable equipment that we tend to buy, pulling from other lines sometimes. We have additional furniture we were looking for the Sharon Parks Library. We have expanded our mailbox books program for for homebound patrons, and that's resulting in significant postage increases. Our IT maintenance costs go up about $11,500 a year, and so that's just a placeholder to try to keep up with that without impacting some of our other lines. And then just janitorial services, we just expect that to go up with a new contract. And we have some ground maintenance that's been put on hold for a while that would be great to catch up on. So that's just our general operations things that we tend to avoid bringing to the county. We tend to use personnel savings or something like that to cover them typically. And then the compensation study, we were so excited to be working on a compensation study with Evergreen, who you'll recognize as the county study. We have put that study on hold simply because I know that no library director in the state of Georgia, or probably the country right now, has time to complete a salary study. But we will get that going again. The cost of the study itself, the library is paying for out of fund balance. This was a placeholder figure for next year, depending on the results of the study. I had hoped to have results for you early in your budget planning process, but this was just something we ended up talking with Evergreen and having to put on hold once COVID hit the way it did, because we just did not have the staff and the time on it. And then, as Dave has already alluded to, we do just always request that you take us into consideration whenever county staff receive a pay increase. I would also add, I know there will be lots of hardship situations this year. We are partially state funded. We do anticipate approximately a $77,000 state cut for next year. That will mostly come from our materials budget, which is the easiest pot of money to look at, but unfortunately, that's kind of what we're all about. And the county actually in the current year gave us an increase for materials to help us bulk up our electronic materials, which has certainly been helpful during COVID. But just please do keep in mind, we will also be experiencing cuts at the state level. So I think that's all that, just to give you a brief rundown. Is there anything I can answer for you?
Hannah, I get bombed with people constantly asking, when will Matt Library ever come to be? I told them they got booted for Denmark. That didn't go over too well.
So yes, we had requested both libraries be on the SPLOST 8 project list, and just the Fowler Road Library adjacent to Denmark made that list. So so that is one of the reasons the bookmobile will be so very present in that community once we're able to get it going. But as far as I could see, there would be no opportunity to build the MAT site. The most we can get for a construction project from the state is $2 million, and we would be pursuing that for both projects. But yeah, unfortunately, SPLOST, I believe, is our only. Now if the county can find, $10 million to give us to build the MAP library, we'll be happy to. but yeah, I'm afraid SPLOST is our, as far as I know, is our only. Of course, impact fees, but they're not. They augment and make it a much nicer facility, but they don't build a facility.
How does it affect you, Anna, when like our building permits were half to what they were the year before as far as impact fees? I mean, where you had those dollars slated to go, or?
Well, it certainly decreases them. I mean, at this point where we are just sort of letting them accumulate for the Denmark project, the Fowler Road project, and we're finishing off some of the impact fees that were designated for the North. That's part of what funded the bookmobile. But we don't see a direct impact till we get to the point that we are, looking at our construction budget. When we get to the point that we're looking at the Fowler Road Library, as I look towards SPLOST, I'm actually more worried about what's going to happen with SPLOST, I guess, than I am about the impact fees. But they're both, with the Sharon Forks renovation, we had about 7 million of that was SPLOST. Excuse me, sorry, not that much, but it was a combination of SPLOST impact fees and state money, and that they all added up to make it the project it was.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nana.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Anna.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, next on the agenda is Parks and Recreation, page 25. It's the summary page, followed by a number of pages of all their line items. For the overall budget, the continuation budget is an increase of just over 4%. Most of that, again, is for salaries and benefits. The operating expenses are up 2.66%, or just a little bit under $100,000. And that is actually, they were looking, and we'll see what kind of participation is next year, but they were actually budgeting more revenue, increase in revenues that would more than cover the increase in operating expenses. The revenues are budgeted to increase by just under 300,000 at the top of that section. At the top of the page, new items, and Jim Pryor, I think, is available. He's online, and he'll address these. They're all related to staffing and positions. He'll go over 3 new full-time positions. Some of that's related to new facilities, 4 part-time rec program positions, and then the last two lines are related. They're looking at a full-time coordinator for rec programs and funding that essentially by eliminating 4 part-time positions, and those 2 pretty much a wash there. With that, I think Jim Pryor is on the meeting.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Thank you for meeting with us today. And, this COVID time has been really, really tough, but we're excited to get things back open and get people back in the door. When you come to a recession or an area where you're struggling with the economy, it makes our business bigger. For some reason, people rely on our services. They get out of the private and come to us. So if we're looking at decreased revenues or a time when people are struggling, this is a time where we're only going to get bigger and stronger. And I know when you reach a time of recession, sometimes you look at cutting this, cutting that. But when you're in a level service budget, if you're making cuts, you're cutting programs and services. So I always say, look on the other end and look at more revenue generation. which you see in our budget here, but also, you know, if you look at our fee schedule as well as a lot of others, I mean, we're dirt cheap with the cost of what we charge people to do. So if we look at our fee schedule, there's an opportunity we have to make even more revenue. So that's another avenue to take if you're looking for money. On our side here, you're seeing a 9.5% increase in revenue. That's coming simply because in 2021, we're not having any facilities being taken up by elections. We're having a tough year in 2020. A lot of our community buildings and rec centers are being used for time periods for election purposes. We get all of those back. Our athletics is killing it as far as people wanting field usage and renting fields for tournaments and things like that. And our therapeutic recreation program is absolutely killing it. We had every week of summer camp for therapeutic completely filled up, and that's with COVID in the picture. People still are excited about those camps if they can get it going. So those three things alone have increased our revenue projection for 2021, and that's not even looking at if we increase some of our fees and fee structure. As far
Hey,
as
Jim, I
Yes,
got
ma'am.
a question on therapeutic program.
Sure.
That I am so desperately wanting to get old Matt School to have some funds to be able, I'm going to go out and raise funds, but I've also wanted it to be where those kids, when Commissioner Cooper and Chairman Simonson and I went to the therapeutic end of year event that you invited us to and saw those kids just how much fun and joy they were having with their program in just that little community building with no stage, and I have thought over and over again about how excited they would be at Matt, and Molly was with me to look at it, if they could actually be up on a stage and their parents could sit there and watch them. And I think it would be such a great thing. But I mean, I know I can raise some money, but I can't raise all of it. I've got to be able to get it to come through somebody's budget to help with that. Did you go look at the stage?
Well, yes, ma'am. I've seen that building before, and I know we're Public Facilities is working with the architect right now to get a design in place and a cost projection of what it's going to cost to get that building up and running. But also know we have a lot of projects that everybody wants that we don't have funding for right now. So it's just a matter of finding the dollars to make it work. And I could definitely see having some therapeutic programs there when we get the Central Park addition built. Possibly moving our therapeutics program to Charles Place and stationing it right in the middle of the county would be another option that we've talked about that could absolutely work. But,
Yeah, I think it's two different things. I think having them a location to be at all the time and then having a place where they could go on stage and perform would be different.
Absolutely. All I know is that program is absolutely knocking it out of the park and killing it. And we try to do what we can with as much space as possible right now, but it's only getting bigger. And the more space we find, the bigger that program will grow.
And
I'm
an
sorry.
interesting question. I'm sorry.
You go ahead.
I was just going to say that maybe the county could look at with the Miracle League field and it being the hub for so much we're hoping to have there, of being able to do an outdoor stage too. Something, a portable like stage that they could use, and have it like a festival, like seating, with their yard chairs and stuff on the field.
That's possible too. And one thing we've talked about with Eagles Beak and some of the other parks that we're building is possibly buying one of those big hydraulic portable stages that you could pull with a truck, sit in any location, and it opens up into a full stage, has all the electronics available. And we could use that in any park that we have throughout the county.
That'd be good, especially when you've got a virus and nobody can come inside.
That's right. So maybe in a future budget down the road, we'll be looking at possibly adding one of those. As far as what we're requesting, what you got in front of you is the level of service budget. That's keeping everything moving forward with all the programs we have and what we're offering. The only new money we're asking for has to do with new facilities, which in 2021, we anticipate having the Greenway Phase 5 open, probably toward the middle of the year. And so that's 5 miles of new Greenway that we're adding. And so we're asking for 2 full-time staff to add to our Greenway staff for maintenance of the Greenway. And of course, that'll give us 5. Right now, we have 3 full-time positions that maintain all of the Greenway, and they're very busy. But with adding this new section, that would give us a crew of 5 for the Greenway.
Yeah, and that's where my question is on those 2 full-time maintenance workers for the Big Creek Greenway.
Yes, ma'am.
Why is there such a difference in the salary of those 2 in comparison to the maintenance worker for Eagles Beak? I mean, that's 117, over 117,000 apiece.
Yeah,
It's mostly
What's the
capital.
Is there a partial year on Eagles Beak, Jim?
there is a partial year on Eagles Beak. We're looking at doing that possibly for the last 3 months or the last quarter of the year. But the Greenway, those positions were only for a half a year.
Right. Now, it's capital costs. See, 114,000 of that's capital, half of it.
Oh, okay, yeah, because we got to have all the equipment to go with it.
Go all the way over to the next to the right-hand column. You see the equipment requirement to bring these people on board.
The equipment, okay. So, well, let me just look at salary. Just look at the salary. So you're telling me that the one for, and that doesn't include the capital. You look at the one for Eagles Beak, the salary is only 15,488. And then half of the other one, what is that? That's, I guess for both of them is 61, right? So that's 30,500, give or take, 30,500, maybe almost 31,000 each, which is more than twice what the other guy's making. I'm just curious why there's such a difference.
Do I talk about the phasing, Jim?
Excuse me?
Why don't you explain the phasing and when those positions, how much
Partial year.
those positions going to be funded?
Right. The 2 Greenway positions will be for half the year, but there is a lot of equipment costs that come with opening those sections of the Greenway, such as trucks, gators. So that's where the equipment cost comes into play. And then with Matt, we're just looking for a quarter of the year.
No, that's not what I'm saying. Look at your salaries. That has nothing to do with your equipment. Your salary for current service level, right?
Yes, ma'am. But that's 2 positions for the Greenway versus 1 for Eagles Beak.
But Jim,
Oh, I
it's
got
like
that. Yeah, I understand that. Let me speak, please, Eric. I understand that. But on the 15,488, that is still only about half of one of the other full-time positions for maintenance on the Greenway. I'm just curious as to why it's so much less. When you say the Greenway's only half a year too, so
Okay.
I'm curious. If there's a big difference, I'm just curious.
I do have Laura Pate on the line, and she's saying that the totals on the sheet right here, the Greenway is for the full year, not the half year. And the Eagles Beak workers are for a quarter of the year.
That explains it. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Jim, is there any update on Eagles Beak?
Yes, ma'am. We're in the second phase of the grant cycle, doing all the state inspections work. I do expect to have a contract to you by July or August for the money for that project, and then we're working with Hayes and James to have the construction plan in place to come shortly after that and get that under construction.
We're not fearful at all that the governor will try to cut the funds that we've already been told we're getting?
You would probably know more about that than I would, but you know, those are dedicated funds. So if he has the ability to touch it, he might touch it. But from what I understand, everything's go with that program right now.
I think it has to be spent. I mean, I think that the way the legislation was, but when, I mean, it just is a worrisome time when anything can be, you don't know what power can be given to cut anything.
Absolutely. You got to worry about that. Absolutely. With the 4 part-time rec program assistant positions, those are a low priority for us, lowest priority. So if anything needs to be cut, we could work without those. And then the two on the bottom, the one full-time coordinator trading in the 4 part-time positions, those were kind of apples for apples. And that's at the Sawney Mountain Preserve. That's the environmental education program that we do for the schools and the field trips that come in. We've been working that program with 4 part-time positions, but that's been a revolving door of struggling to get people hired for those positions, getting them trained, and then them leaving for other positions in other sectors. That program would be much more effective if we had a full-time, more permanent person that we could train, keep on board to keep those programs operating year-round. And that's the reason we want to make that conversion.
So Jim, you threw something out at the very beginning that I think maybe just worth asking the 3 commissioners about. You pointed out that you could look at charging more. So I guess the question is there any interest in that? Right now, it's a $15 fee to buy a membership for the year. Is that correct?
Yeah, to belong to a rec center, it's $15 a year, and if you're a senior, it's free. So I think we have some areas that are just really, really cheap. I mean, really, really low.
You always get the argument, though, that the taxpayers who paid for it to begin with.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of times we use SPLOST and bond money to build things, but it's the reoccurring operations that the fee schedule goes for. And so when you look at a budget, that's a good explanation. It's like a user fee of what we have for our fee schedule. So I'm not saying double our fees or triple our fees, but we do have a lot of fees that haven't been touched in 10, 15 years that are relatively low. And so sometimes instead of looking to cut out things, sometimes if you increase your user fees to use the service, that might balance out some things.
Could you do a study to what other counties around us charge? I'm not wild about user fees, but I mean, when I was on Park and Rec Board, somebody brought up we should start charging people to use the park, and that everybody that drives in to use it. And I said, I'm not going there. I'm a Republican, and we don't, that is asking for, we've asked you to pay for this bond to build these parks, and then we're going to charge you to walk on it and to drive in, and who would keep up with it? I just thought it was a disaster. I never supported it. But for programs that people, I think it would be worth looking at a comparison. If nothing else, to say to people, this is what other counties do and this is what we do.
Right. You know, and that's tough for us. I know we always try to benchmark ourselves, but we're kind of the model in a lot of cases, and people are looking at us at what we're doing and trying to copy that. But we're a little bit unique and different, especially with our booster clubs and the way we operate. Other counties can't make that work or don't do it the way we do it. And so that's tough to benchmark that area. But one thing Laura Pate and I have been talking about is more of a cost recovery program, as far as looking at different programs, putting them in categories, and then figuring out how much of that do we want to generate in fees to supplement the direct costs, and how much the government wants to cover to supplement those programs. And so we could look at putting a model like that. That's what I would recommend, more than just looking at everybody else and what they're charging, is just figure out the value of those categories and what we want to supplement.
Usually with that, so I'm going to kill this for you right now, Jim, because that's what I did for a living 30 years ago. And typically you want your youth programs to be heavily subsidized because you want kids off the street. You want them to have something to be able to do after school, weekends. It's usually the programs for adults where we're giving people an incredible deal versus belonging to a gym. And so it's usually the adult programs where you charge a higher amount of the cost to try to recover what it costs to operate the facility. And you're not making money, but it's a matter of how heavily do you subsidize. So typically youth programs very heavily subsidized, and they may be free if you get a free school lunch, but adults, I know a couple of jurisdictions that expanded their Parks and Rec programs based on adult user fees. And
That's exactly the key. And if you have a specialized facility, say if you had a gymnastics arena, then you could charge 100%. That's not subsidized. That's a specialty program.
yeah,
So, we're not in that direction, but we would like to head in that direction as far as a pricing structure for our programs. But
Which is what you did on the therapeutic program anyway. Isn't that what you did with it? You started it out with more fees.
yeah, well, we started out with fees similar to other programs. Everything just wasn't free. So it's consistent with all the other programs we operate for kids. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I think from my standpoint, we need to get away from this concept of free. There's really nothing free. We pay for it somehow. So our greenway is in bad need of refurbishing and updating. And I just can't see us trying to go along penny wise on this and not be able to up the fees to make them consistent with those in surrounding areas. We have a great park system, but if we're not careful, we're gonna get more maintenance liabilities than we're gonna be able to catch up with. So I think my recommendation is that let Jim go and look, and where we need to make increases, then we should definitely consider those, because there is a cost of doing business and having these parks and rec. And I don't want anyone to be under the illusion that any of this comes free, because there is nothing free.
Hey, Jim, with our Forsyth County Park Foundation, could we do a branch of that for Friends of the Greenway and maybe try to get corporate sponsors and stuff for the Greenway too?
That's possible, or you can just get the foundation to work on that as a project or a focus. I don't know if you want to keep creating other groups, but Chris is going to get with the foundation, just put that as a focus for them.
I think that would be a great project for them. And I believe there'd be people that would, the Greenway is so expensive. Oh my God, it's so expensive. And even when you're not trying to create new, just the maintenance of it is unbelievably expensive. I wish we had a supplemental program that went, and I believe most communities have that, do they not?
Well, most communities don't have a greenway as sophisticated as ours. So, we're way up there with that. And we have a lot of boardwalk on ours. It's just not a cement or asphalt trail most of the way. So, we're a little bit higher complexity than a lot of people are. And we put a lot of dedicated resources into the Greenway, but you also know that's an icon of our community. People absolutely love it. And even during this time when things were shut down, the Greenway was still packed. So, it's a big asset to our community.
I agree with what Dennis said, that we need to look at it. We need to really just look at every type of revenue source, that we can use, to get this. I believe if you look at that Comet and you look at, what's the one in Atlanta that's so popular, the Greenway, that's got all the business?
Silver Comet?
The Beltline.
Oh, the
Beltline
Beltline.
and then Silver Comet, yeah.
They've got dual, where people are donating to it as well.
Yeah.
And I'm like Dennis too on this. I agree, just to add to it. On the fees, I know, Cindy, I hear what you're saying about, being Republican and taxpayers have already paid. But if we do the fees, then you're also people that are not from this county that use our parks will be helping to pay for their utilization of the parks. And I think we probably have a lot of that from neighboring counties coming over here.
Yeah.
So in addition to, not in place of, but in addition to, because our parks do cost, and that Greenway, boy, it eats up the bucks, doesn't it? Man, jeez.
Money pit.
It is a money pit. It really is.
Just passing on the cost. That's like Jim said, it's an excellent point. We're not making any money off of it. And though the taxpayers built it, there is maintenance and recurring costs that are not covered that we have to do to keep it up so we don't get behind on having the world-class park system that we have, thanks to Jim and his team.
Well, didn't we just have a couple of meetings ago? What was it, $5 million just in repair?
Yeah.
That's just for a small section.
Yep.
That wasn't all repairs. That's just for a small section of it. So
That's right, about a mile and a half.
yeah,
Yep.
it's crazy.
And it is a great incentive, you know, for building and for attracting mixed-use development. So when those come in, and we had a discussion this morning about the quarry, there's going to be some ask there for them to pay their way also. So it's just the world we live in. You know, this concept of Bernie Sanders and the free lunch, I mean, they just ain't nothing free. And we just need to make sure that we take in the money to keep things up to the standard that our citizens expect.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with that, but you will get that. When we just had a conversation when I was on park board about user fees, people went crazy. I mean, look at the tennis courts. I mean, I don't know, Jim, if you were here then when we talked about making Fowler be just the user fees for tennis, and we had people lining up the aisles yelling at the board about it. I mean, they look at it and that they are paying in their property tax for the bond that built the park. They're paying sales tax everywhere for it to be used for this. And now we're trying to hit them a third way. And that's why our board, even before Molly came on, we talked about doing a millage rate just for Park and Rec to try to do like fire and have, because of the operating costs. But then that never went anywhere either. I mean, Park and Rec is it's almost like a gratuity, an amenity for a community. And it is, people get angry about it.
It is
Right.
an amenity. You have to pay for it. And I understand what you're saying, Cindy. People are they're going to get angry about the extra cost. And I understand that. But at the same time, to have it, you got the expense. It's not like anybody's pocketing this. And maybe if we just give the explanation of how much this stuff really cost, particularly the Greenway. Does anybody have any idea, a regular citizen, how much that thing cost and the repairs?
Oh.
And then we voted in to go with the cement and the cement pillars on that, you know, the pylons, whatever you call them. You know, that was what, 90,000 zillion billion dollars for that. It's unbelievable, the price on it. And then it falls apart whenever we use the boardwalk part of it. It's already, how much of it's rotted. But people want it. But if you want it, I'm sorry, the tax money just isn't enough to cover it. Either that or we raise taxes. You don't want that either. So why not let it be the people that use it help pay for it? It's a minimal fee.
Yeah, my major point in bringing that up was, you know, we're on a level of service budget. So if you start cutting, you're going to cut programs and services, and people will be yelling about that when you cut their program and service. So, you know, one other avenue is if you don't want to cut it, then you might have to raise the fee to generate more revenue to cover it in the times that we're in.
Exactly. And it's not pretty, you know, and people do get angry about it. I understand. Every time I pay my taxes, I get mad. I understand. But the thing about, I guess the thing that I kind of lean toward the fees on, those are for the people that are actually using it. You see what I mean? So, and I'm not saying instead of taxes, I'm just saying, to me, that is more of a fair collection because you're the one using it. That's all. I'm done with my ranting. I'm through.
Sorry to get y'all all riled up.
Eric, you muted.
I'm sorry, I muted myself because Dave got cut off.
I think I'm back. Can you hear me?
Stephen, if you can put that page back up, Commissioner Cooper, what you were just hitting, if you look at the bottom of the Parks and Rec page that shows revenues and expenditures.
Yes.
For 2021, revenue generates 3.3 million. And the total cost of the programs is almost 4 million. So
wait a
the
minute.
net cost to
Are
the
you not
general
on the-
fund,
You're not on this, are you on the summary page? Because I'm not seeing
Yep.
3 point.
yep, look
Okay,
on,
yeah.
look on your screen. So 3.3 million, that's revenue, and it's up. It's up significantly.
Yes,
You
yeah.
go down and you see 11.381 million. And
Mhm.
then just above the full-time positions count of 81, you see 8.068 million. That's how much property tax money is going into paying for Parks and Rec. $8 million. User fees are paying 3.3. So right now, user fees are paying less than a third of the cost of operating and maintaining the Parks and Rec department. So when people say, I'm already paying for it, well, yes, they're paying $8 million in property taxes, but we're looking at the fact that Jim would like to add $250,000 worth of costs in order to maintain the Greenway, Eagles Beak. We haven't talked about the additional part-time rec program assistance, but to be able to cover those increasing costs, we're simply saying that rather than ask for more than $8 million of property taxes, we'd like to get more from the people that actually use the programs.
Yes, exactly.
That page
Yeah.
shows it.
You know, and we have a 30% cost recovery rate, which is really good. The average Parks and Recreation Department nationwide is 6%.
Kidding.
In some locations, they make you go 100%. They make you recover everything you spend. So, you know, we're way better than average, but we still don't really charge a lot for the value of our services. I'm just saying, if we look at our fee schedule, I think we can go up in some areas and make more revenue as opposed to cutting things out.
And
Jim, I
maybe
need
at
to
the
tell you that back in the 1800s, when I was growing up in DeKalb County, we had to pay for park admission. You had to pay if you went in there for anything. And that was way back when. DeKalb's been charging it forever. So I'm just saying, you know?
We don't want to be like DeKalb.
It goes back in the 1800s, honey. Now, that's a while back. And I know we don't. But we got fantastic parks, you know, we really do.
Oh, we do.
You know, you get what you pay for, I guess maybe is what I'm saying. If you want all these great parks, I'm sorry, if you're gonna come in and you want to use these great parks, you know, yeah, and I'm not saying it costs $100 to get in, you know, a minimal fee to help pay for the operation and maintenance of the park.
I don't disagree, but I think we've got to educate the public about it. I don't
You're
think
right.
they understand. And I think that
You're right.
communicating this through communications, the very numbers Eric just brought up, that needs to be communicated to people. They don't, I mean, do an article in the paper, do whatever, but we need education to people on it.
You know, Jim, as a matter of fact, I agree with you, Cindy, completely on that. Jim, how about you talking to the paper, and I mean this, and just having do an interview where you let people know how much it costs to repair that greenway and how much that greenway costs, because I don't think they have a clue. And it's something that everybody uses, you know, or what a lot of people use. It's highly utilized. And I don't mean that to try to make it look bad, but just for people to understand, to have something this nice, this is how much it costs.
I agree.
Sounds good. Any other questions for Parks and Rec? Jim, do you want to talk about those rec program assistants in athletics?
Yeah, you know, like I said, those are the lowest priority of what we're asking for. We were just going to do, we were going to have one located regionally for tennis programs, for tournaments in the parks, to coordinate those administratively. So that's what we were asking those for. But like I said, the other positions are much more priority, especially with the Greenway, because that eats us up right now.
Any other questions? Okay.
One sort of unrelated, but Jim, I've been thinking about summer camps, and I know you hire a lot of part-time staff to do that, and with you hanging, not knowing if you're going to have the summer camps or not, how are you able to manage that?
Right now, we've got all the summer camps planned out. we've got people that have registered with those, and we have frozen the hiring on all of our part-time staff. We've gotten to the point where we know people who want to work for us. We just haven't officially hired them yet. So we are just week by week waiting to hear. Right now, we're trying to, if all things go well, trying to get summer camp going sometime around mid-June. We might be pushed off to wait till July, but then we have to get to the point of is hiring all this staff and doing 3 weeks of camps worth it? So, we're week to week, we're working on this, but while we're not offering the camps, we're not spending the money on the staff to operate them. So we are trying to save as much money as we can. But like I said, it's a week to week thing with everything we do right now.
So it does affect your budget because you're showing revenue that you might not take in.
That's correct. It's going to hurt us on the revenue side, but we're also not spending money to offer that program. So we're not hurting as bad as you think we would be. Hopefully through this year, what we don't make in our revenue goal, we're going to have left over in expenses because we're trying to save money where we can.
Thank you.
Eric, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, I'm back.
Okay.
I'm back. I'm ready.
You just lost your picture though.
I turned it. Yeah, well, it takes
Okay.
up resources, and that's what knocks me off sometimes. I'm smiling. Okay, we ready for next item?
Okay. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Jim. Okay, next is economic development. And on the summary, jump past all the pages for parks. It's on page 45. And let me get up to that page. A few words of introduction here. And here's something we had not talked about yet because it's another fund, another revenue source. It's going to get really slammed by the COVID pandemic. And that is economic development, the hotel motel tax. What you see here, page 45, is just the funding that comes from the general fund. There's $310,000 here that goes to the chamber. And by the way, James McCoy is on the call, so he'll be on in a minute. The other piece of that, in Senate's report, Stephen's able to get that up, which will show what the request really comes from 2 sources: the hotel motel tax, which is another fund, plus the general fund here. You see the 310,000. Of the 600,000 roughly, there we go, that the hotel motel tax had been collecting, if you can make that a little larger, Stephen, 60% of it, or 360,000, you can use for a purpose other than tourism. 40% must go toward tourism. So you see here, they have 360,000 from hotel motel tax, and he'll get that sized up rightly for you. And then the amount they're requesting from the general fund. The hotel motel tax is, of course, probably in as much jeopardy as anything right now, because who knows when travel and hotel stays will recover, maybe after everything else does, beyond restaurants and other activities. So I'm sure they're very concerned over the chamber about how viable that 360,000 is going to be this year and next year. Other than that, his request is for 355,000 from the general fund. Gives a brief summary there what they are. He just got this request in recently. Normally they have it later with a full presentation, but at least want to give James a chance to present and comment today what he's ready to. And this may go on a later agenda for much more detailed presentation. James, you there?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
Sure, I can.
Okay, great. Dave, you were exactly right. We have been watching, as you can imagine, occupancy tax and very closely. Michelle Daniels in our office has been in contact with hotel operators weekly. The long and the short of it is it may, for our local hotels, this year is going to be extremely tough for them. Most of the hotels are still operating at the 60 and 70% below where they were, although I will tell you most of the end of March, beginning of April, they were operating 10% and less of where they were this time last year. We have projected overall about a 37% decrease in revenue from occupancy tax. We've of course have shifted some things around. We're taking a interim budget to our board, or excuse me, an amended budget to our board tomorrow. And with the executive committee has already approved, but the full board will need to adopt that. And of course, the work of economic development overall and the work of tourism development is dramatically different. To make a long story short, we took everything that we had been doing this past year for economic development for the month of April and now most of May and half of March, and invested it into the Together for FOCO initiative, which I think most of you are, the commissioners are familiar with. And so what you are seeing in front of you, what that reflects, the 360, is based upon the projections that we're hearing from hotel operators. They are anticipating by the time we get to the end of this year that they will be back about where they should be. Now, they're not going to be doing better than they did last year, but they're anticipating being about where they were this time last year. There are also some questions as to whether or not two of the hotel projects that we expect to be built will be built, namely the project at Halcyon and another project at Exit 14, both of whom were moving along, both actually more slowly than anyone had anticipated or wanted to happen. But at some point, those projects will happen. The question is whether or not they would happen by 2021 or for 2021 or not. The rest of the budget, what we've done was I pulled out of the economic development plan based upon the conversations that we've been having with Forward Forsyth stakeholder group, and some staff changes that we are implementing that I have shared with you all via some of our reports. But the long and the short of it is that the net change that I would be asking for is to move the fee up to 355, the 2019 budget allocation. And this past year it has been 310. What that would allow us to do is to have a little bit more flexibility in securing additional Class A office space, securing some industrial park development, and really getting that off of the ground, which I can talk about a little bit more in detail. It will also give us greater flexibility and ability as we bring on a new vice president of economic development. The department changed enormously over the last 3 or 4 years, and the leadership that we're going to need based upon the expectations of the economic development plan are there as well. 2019 was a very good year for all of us. And some great announcements were made this past year with companies that we've worked with. The partnership, I think, with specifically with Vivian Vakili and the county is yielding real results. And this is, I imagine most of your conversations really are about, where can, their cost centers. And I really hope that over time we've been able to demonstrate that this is an expense, but there is very much a return on that expense in the companies that are coming and the product that is being built. And again, product is really new product, meaning office space, flex space, warehouse space, all of that kind of space. We are out of it. And even with the changes in the economy, we're going to continue to be out of it. And we really, as a community, have to take the leadership initiative of getting that up and out of the ground across the board and throughout the community. It's not just south, north, east, or west. We've got to really be looking at those opportunities to be getting that investment, because that is in turn what will drive the companies locating here and our ability to keep the ones that are growing here by getting them the flexibility and space. So That's what this budget is really about. I'll tell you, this is my first year meeting with in 15 years, first year's meeting with the Finance Committee itself, and certainly, I'm be happy to answer questions or share with you anything specifically that we need to chat about. I'm happy to.
Questions?
Well, I think that this virus has shown our vulnerability, definitely, when your finance is so geared toward one industry. It does make it where I know you're in a very, very difficult position to be in, because once those days are gone, even if they're at full capacity, a lot more, you still can't catch back up.
That's absolutely right, and that's one of the things we're working on, and actually I'll tell you, hats off to Eric and other county staff, because we were having a conversation really day one, or at least very early on in the process, about anything that we could be doing to help the hotels. And I will tell you, there's more than one hotel who told us that they would have been absolutely empty if there wasn't this promotion going on of use of their hotel for local folks to be able to, get out of the house with the kids screaming, or for that matter, I know they've offered first responders and others free hotel nights, which most hotels are compensating the flagship is compensating the local owner for. So there are some, but it has been devastating. And Cindy, you're exactly right. We cannot unring this bell. There's no catching up to it. And even if we could, we only have so many hotel rooms. And if we were selling out 100% of those hotel rooms from July until December, we still wouldn't make up for it.
I love the fact the way y'all supported existing businesses. I think that has had some help on them. I've just noticed on social media, that shop local or eat local, or the different campaigns that's been going, and especially on trying to help people get loans and pointing them to the right direction, because we needed somebody to be that voice. And I appreciate y'all doing that a lot.
Well, thank you, Cindy. I learned a lot during the Great Recession, and the thing that I probably learned most, and I will say, I think the PPP and the EIDL loan program of the SBA is probably one of the best federal stimulus programs in 50 years. And maybe ever, because it really got at the very heart of what I saw in the recession and saw again this last time, and that is getting people businesses and companies the working capital that they needed to bridge the gap. And so far, that does in fact seem to be the case. I am literally knocking on wood as I say this, but we are not aware, and I'm not saying that there's not one. I talked about it at staff meeting last week. We are not aware of any restaurant or any other company. There have been plenty of layoffs announced. There have been plenty of we're pulling back announced, but I am not aware of anyone who is just absolutely outright shut down. And that's really remarkable. And actually, hopefully, I think it speaks well of the community showing up to those businesses and doing business with them.
Also, James, could you email us, each one of us, the budget summary that you put up on the screen
Yes, I'd be happy to.
for the chamber?
And I'll tell you, of course, I'm happy to provide as much or as little detail and chat with you. But yes, absolutely, Commissioner Cooper, I'm happy to.
Thanks.
James, I was really surprised that when Dave Gruen did the summary earlier today, and they were talking about that in this year's summary, that our commercial, and / industrial is going the other way, that we were like down 1%. I felt like we had made so much effort, and I even asked if there's a lag time in between what's being, what we hear your announcements versus when we see it actually occur. But I felt like we put a lot of effort into going the other way, and it's sort of depressing to have heard what Dave said. Thanks, Dave. You made us depressed.
Well, I will tell you, Commissioner Mills, there's two parts of that. One, I think you're right. There is there's absolutely from the time the numbers when we share them, they are because a company has made some level of commitment and said to us, we've signed a lease, we've bought a piece of property, more often than not, it's signed a lease, and we're going to do an expansion. Or we're going to relocate, or most of those have actually been local companies doing expansions. And what you're hitting on is exactly why new product development is so important, because the vast majority of companies that we are working with are rolling into space that they are leasing. Very few of the companies that we work with buy a building. The vast majority of them are rolling into space. Dexter is a great example. My guess is when the Dexter development is built and on the books and complete, you will start to see that change. I'd also encourage you to keep in mind, we're also, trying to keep up with the growth of the proportion of the residential part of the tax digest. And even if we didn't build more houses, if the value is going up higher than the value of that commercial properties are going up, then we are, we are fighting a very, very steep hill to climb. But having said that, I think the most important thing that we can do, both from getting more companies here, but also driving at the very thing that you're talking about, we have to have new product. And developers are slowly looking at Forsyth County, but the more that we can do to encourage that and create some partnerships where that investment can come, we will see that commercial investment coming. And what I would say is the work that we did have continued to do, I think it would have actually been much worse if we weren't doing what we are doing to get that investment in the ground. But you're right. I mean, there is a lag, but I'd also encourage you to be thinking about, well, what all can we be doing in this work to get that new product built and up and out of the ground.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because one of our strategic plan items was that business park out at the rendering plant, and we got rid of the apartments and we've got that, but when I got on that one call with Larry, and it's like, we don't even want to talk about that. That's not what we're looking at. We're only looking at Class A office, and everything I've heard from, I just don't understand if we're looking at this strategic plan that was all facets that we're trying to do to up our, commercial and our tax base, why we're only looking at Class A. I find that disturbing.
Well, I would tell you, Commissioner, that was the content of the meeting. You are correct, but in practice, that's not actually what is going on. In that we are working and continue to work with, and in fact, my guess would be that a business park that would be further north in the county, closer to 400, My guess is, based upon where the development authority is in their process, and based upon the last conversation that I had with David Seago, I suspect there should be movement on that, and hopefully David has reached out to you to talk to you about it. But from the development authority's perspective, I will revisit that with him. But I really suspect, Commissioner, that that's probably where we would see the first movement. Larry Duckworth, and I understand why, is a big champion for Class A office, and I think that's very important as well. I mean, but I really think that in practice, what actually is happening, despite the discussion in a particular meeting, in practice, it's really all going to be all over the board, and already is. But you're absolutely right, and in addition to that, I would say that a lot of the companies that we are pursuing, and as part of the economic development plan, the reality is that many of them, they might have a small footprint of Class A office space, but they are doing, even a lot of the technology companies, they're not using the Class A office space. They would be using flex space and flex space in the back office and in the front sort of space, much like what McDonald Development has built and is hoping to build in the future. So I think there's all that to say, I think you're absolutely right. It can't be just one thing.
James, on that, I'm with Cindy, and I think the extreme priority of Class A office is not really productive, because I've also heard, and everyone else has, Doug Jenkins say that the Class A office, that his peers, people with companies the size of his, are looking at that differently now.
Absolutely,
so,
yeah.
What's growing, what's coming, not be dog set and cemented into something that there may not be a market for it. The demand just might not be there to.
And it is so early, Commissioner Cooper, to know what the market for that's really going to look like. I mean, there's so many, competing schools of thought. You've got one school of thought, and it's sometimes from the very same people, that there will be an out migration of Class A office from inside the perimeter because of density, and wanting to be in a less dense environment. That you've got a lot more people who are saying, why do we need all this real estate when our folks are being productive working from home? And that is valid. And then you have a lot of other people saying, gosh, we're going to need a bigger office footprint because we need, everybody's going to need an office door that they can close, and everybody's going to, the common area spaces are going to have to be larger. And so we don't know what is going to come out in the wash in that. And that's different, of course, than some of the flex space product and other product that we're working on as well, because there's been less disruption to that market than there has been to Class A office. And you are 110% right. We do not know what the future is going to look like. That doesn't mean we don't need to work on it. It doesn't mean it's not, important and a priority. It is, but I think making sure that we are working on a diversity of product is really, really critical, because of the very thing we're talking about. We don't know what's going to happen. We didn't know that this was going to happen.
I think if you put all your eggs in one basket, you're in trouble.
Yeah, I agree with that, and that's what the economic development plan says as well, Commissioner. That it's got to be a diversity of product.
Yeah, because one thing that never changes, James, no matter what, is follow the money, and you want the most bang for your buck.
That's right. That's right.
Any other questions?
Mm-mm. James.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, James.
Thank you.
All right. Next up is Natural Resources and Conservation, page 47. I think we have Vivian Tanner on the line. She doesn't always get a chance to meet the committee each year, but this is a smaller budget, which is really related to the permitting and review end of things in the county. And fact is, in this budget, there's no new request, and the dollar amount, I think, is the same as the previous year.
What page?
47.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
47.
It's actually down $100, Dave.
Yeah, at a weak moment. Anyway, yes, it's just down $100.
That's
So
good to me. I love
she gets the star for the day.
absolutely. Next.
Oh, no.
Any other questions? Vivian, are you online there just to greet the committee? I think we had her on before. All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next one. Now, the next two in the agenda, Building and Economic Development, page 49, and then down to page 58, Planning and Community Development. In prior years, of course, we're one all department in Planning and Community Development. So this is the first time really the committee and then the board will get to see how these two functions were split out. The first one is Building and Economic Development, which is under Vivian. And what broke out from Planning and Community Development was basically the building permitting and inspections function, along with combining that with economic development. So page 49, there isn't much to compare to from prior years. Either it was a partial year or there was no full year actuals to compare to. But get to page 47.
Stephen, can you mute caller 20, please?
I think in combination with the two departments, when I compared them before and after, I think we actually came out lower in total cost from where we were before. Okay, page 47.
49, isn't it?
I'm sorry.
40,
Yes.
Yeah, 49 and 58, Dave.
Oh, boy, that doesn't look right to me. There we go. There we go. So for this side of the function, it was broken out for Building and Economic Development. It's a total budget for next year of $3.8 million. And again, that's the current year is a partial year. And it started after this change occurred after the beginning of this year. And it's just not comparable here. You'd have to see the two in combination. With that, I think Vivian is on the line. Vivian, if you want to add anything, or any questions from the committee for this area?
So we're projecting our building permits to be the same as they were in 2019, which is half of what they were in 2018.
Commissioner, I have looked at the first 4 months of 18 compared to 19. I think there is a slight decrease just compared to the first 4 months of 19. I haven't really dug in to do the analysis of how that compares to years prior to that. There seems to be, like I said, just a little bit of a trend, but to me, it's not dramatic at this point.
Yeah, I think, and I've looked at that too, Commissioner Mills, and thank you. I know you'd asked that question to get some data. I think the big reduction from 18 to 19 was that in 18, there were like over 1,200 multifamily units permitted. And in 19, there were 0. So the number of single family permits went down about 22% from 18 to 19. But to your point, if you add the multifamily to the single family, that's where you have a 50% reduction from 2018 to 2019. It's 500 fewer single family, but 1,260 fewer multifamily units.
And that could be in relation to the change in our comp plan some, because it narrowed the places that multifamily could go.
Exactly.
I was trying to see if there was any correlation to that, and I think that's a good point you just made. That could be the correlation.
Yeah, because where you have some quality single family, you're still going to have the single family, but it's and the challenge, I think it's a little bit like what we're talking about with economic development. These multifamily projects are probably in the works for a while, and they come in as a lump sum in terms of the units being permitted. So the ones that happened in 2018 were probably already in the works at the time of the comp plan, but you would now see more and more of the impact of the comp plan this year and next year as what few projects were in the works work their way through, and new ones aren't introduced to that same extent or at all.
Yeah, those apartments up on 400 in my district were approved in 2005. But they probably all got permitted. There were 300 units, and most of them were permitted in 1 year.
Yeah.
So what is Vivian doing? Vivian, what are you doing to drive economic development any separately from the chamber or working with the chamber?
Sure. So yeah, we're continuing to work with the chamber. You know, a lot of times I get requests, the requests come to me from businesses. Sometimes businesses are reaching out. They want to know what loan programs are available. They want to know any kind of resources that are available. I quickly contact the chamber to work on any kind of items like that. Sometimes they have more resources than we do in terms of being abreast of, what the, feds are, providing in terms of loans, just being able to support our businesses that way. In addition to that, just continuing to work on any time the chamber brings an incentive project to the county, right? So I know they work a number of projects. Anytime, there's an incentive involved, meaning that they qualify for an incentive from the county, the chamber is required to bring that project to me for me to look at, for us to do an analysis, figure out if it qualifies. So we continue to work on items like that. Continue to work with the Georgia Department of Economic Development on any projects that they're bringing. We've had conversations recently about a tax abatement project. So, I mean, just all kinds of stuff like that. I'm continuing to work with businesses on the county's end, for instance, Halcyon, Dexter, really any business that reaches out, continuing to do the roundtable meetings that we need to have for all departments. I've done a call with Halcyon doing like a virtual roundtable. So all kinds of items like that are ongoing. I think Dave mentioned that the Department of Building and Economic Development Inspections and Permitting is not just that, actually includes commercial plan review as well as residential plan review. So my team are the ones that are checking against design standards, Southeast design standards, countywide design standards when people submit for applications. So in this new department, I'm not just covering all the economic development items that were covered before, but also what's included is commercial plan review, residential plan review, all the county's building inspections and permitting functions.
On your salaries, Vivian,
Yes.
it was about around $300,000 increase there, maybe a little over. And from 2020 to 2021, is that because permits got added in under your umbrella?
I'm sorry, what
Extra salaries?
last part of that, please, Commissioner Cooper?
Yeah, on the salaries, on the expenses with the salaries, from 2020 to 2021, it increased by what, about 600,000, right?
Yeah.
So that increase of about 600,000, is that because permits came in underneath your umbrella? Was that what that increase was?
Commissioner Cooper, let me take a look at that and let you know precisely. This is my first time through the budget cycle. I'm not sure of that, but let me check on that and I will certainly let you know exactly what that increase was.
All right, thank you.
That's a huge increase. It must be because of that. Vivian, talking about economic development again, do you, I think Molly brought up that Cadillac and Audi are now, and we know the COVID, we know that, but do we ever go back and call on businesses that were coming and they didn't and find out why? Because I think maybe we could learn from that. I mean, when I'm out in the community, which I know you've been a part of those development meetings that we've been a part of for 2 years and have made some improvements, but I think we need to have you in this role that you're in, look at realistically, what do we have in place that might stop people from coming here? You know, if we're looking at doing impact fees on commercial, we need you to be a voice that says, I don't think it would affect it, or I think it would be a huge detriment in drawing people in. You know, we need to have that person that is giving us advice, because when we do make decisions and then we come back and we are in the midst of the consequence of the decision, sometimes that is the greatest. I mean, we're doing things that are totally working against the very thing we're putting money in to achieve. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes, Commissioner Mills, I do hear reasons as to why they don't, or they're not able to go through with what they originally were thinking. Sometimes I don't, but I definitely appreciate what you're saying, and I'm happy to provide that kind of input. I think maybe what you're saying that might trigger me to, you know, talk to James and maybe figure out a way for us to project by project kind of be able to touch base on these things. So maybe we're not just talking when it comes to incentives, but we're talking when it comes to when projects are coming, when they're leaving, regardless of whether or not they triggered an incentive. So I really appreciate you mentioning that and giving that direction. And I will touch base with James and make sure that we get on the same page and do some sort of follow-up for that, so I can present you with that sort of information when you ask for it.
Yeah, because it bothers me tremendously when I'm out in the community. And just Saturday, I had a call that I reached out to you on getting a CO for a company. And the guy said, well, you know, people just don't like to come to Forsyth County. It's too hard to work in. And I said, can you help me understand? Do you hear that a lot, Molly?
Well, I used to, and you know, I tell them, you know, how many years ago was that? When was the last time you tried? And they will say, well, you know, it's been about 3 or 5 years. Yeah, give us a whirl, because a lot of changes. So it's like, once that got set in and people started saying it, I guess they think it stays the same for the next 30 years. And how do we get out there that we are really reaching out to you? We're really, that which was a stumbling block no longer exists. We now have Vivian. We didn't have her before.
And Commissioner Mills, I do want to mention, you know, and it's, I can promise you, it's really the way I see it is that, you know, so I just jumped into this role of this building and economic development, you know, director position just recently, about a month or so. I have a lot of things that I want to do related not just to the art department, but related to how we do business as a whole with permitting and plan review and all this type of stuff. I've got plans for things I want to change, things I want to be more clear for our customers, all kinds of stuff. It's just been in this past month, I've kind of been really busy trying to kind of get the shop in order, you know, and kind of get this new department really in place. I mean, we don't have a website yet. We're working on that, hoping to get that up as soon as we can get some assistance with that. But there are just a lot of things to do, but I'm really excited about it. And I think it's going to be a tremendous challenge. And I'm really looking forward to not just, you know, having a direct hand in how we do plan review and building permitting, but also hopefully as a county, we can streamline some of these operations so it's not so daunting to folks. And I always say this, if you hear from customers that have specific concerns, please tell them to reach out directly to me. Tell them to reach out, because if we don't know exactly what the concern is, it's just a rumor, is the way I see it. But if they reach out to us, we need a chance to address the problem.
You know, I saw in dealing with the car dealership up there on 400, and you pull that meeting together, and if we could have had that meeting early on, he could have gotten open maybe a couple of months ahead of what he did.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I've mentioned for, you know, for years now, is that I would love for us to have mandatory commercial commercial plan review meetings preliminaries for every commercial building permit that's submitted. I mean, and it's not that we want to, make people jump through another hoop. It's that, overwhelmingly when we have those meetings, I feel like everybody is really happy. People are really informed. They know what they're getting into. I mean, for example, that's one of the things that you just mentioned. That's one of the things I want to put in place, but right now I don't even have a website yet. So it's really just trying to get these basics in place so we can direct customers, get some of these changes made, but like I said, I'm excited about doing it, but what you just mentioned, that's one of the things I've been wanting to do for a long time, and I hope we can put that in place very soon.
That's a great idea.
Vivian, I'm squirreling off a little bit from budget, and I apologize. We will get back to budget. But I just want to say, once you get that, I know you're overwhelmed right now. You got the website you're doing, but once you kind of get your building blocks of the changes that you plan to make, would you please meet with each one of us? Because I would just love to hear what you've got planned so I can tell developers where I am.
Absolutely, and I appreciate it. Yes, certainly I will. Thank you. Yep, I will for sure.
One thing while you're looking for the next question, we split a department apart, but I think if you look at the total of the budget for 2020 and the 2021 budget for building and economic development on page 49 and add it to the planning and community development budget on 58, you'll see that the total actually goes down between those 2 years. So I don't understand all the ins and outs of what was reflected in the prior years, but basically we just divvied up and moved Vivian out of the admin budget and then combined her with some functions that had been previously in the planning and community development budget.
And
Well, I'd ask the only one I wondered about, and that was the change of salary, the big increase in salary. And you said you'd get back with me on that one. So
yes, Commissioner Cooper, I certainly will. But one thing I do want to just say, because I know this to be for a fact right now, to maybe alleviate maybe some of the concern that you have, is that I can tell you that I did not add any. So there's going to be 2 positions that are going to be added in this department. One is a deputy director, another one is an executive assistant. But just so you're aware, Commissioner, those were basically, for lack of a better term, recycling or reworking of other positions. There was no creation of a new position, and then we need new money to create something. It was all like basically taking these 2 positions we don't need, turning them into one position, if that makes sense. But I did not come to the board asking for any kind of new position in terms of brand new money.
Well, I'm guessing with it being the amount that it is, with it being right at 600,000. That's why I was guessing that something came under your umbrella from another department that had not been under your umbrella before. Because I mean, that's just switching around. So I was mostly curious, so I can inside my head know where each thing goes.
Sure, I understand.
Commissioner, I want to see the same thing because we have an offsetting reduction in salaries in Tom Brown's department. So I think when you combine the 2 together, you have some different positions and how we align them, but the bottom line isn't changing by any significant amount. It looks like it's down, but I know that that's because Vivian came out of the admin department budget. So you'll see a reduction in salaries that hit admin, and
it's just housekeeping, more or less.
Exactly.
Getting the right department. So, and that was all I had. Thank you. Thank you very much, Vivian.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to.
Before I move on, can I just point out, since this is something that Vivian also inherited, but Tom still has a heavy part of. Commissioner Mills, you've been waiting for that new system to go live?
Yeah, just 8 years.
Today.
It went live today?
Vivian, did it go live today?
It did.
We're up. And Heather Sparks, who still works for Tom, put her heart and soul into that. And I don't know if any of them are on this call. Vivian inherited a whole bunch of people that are going to be using that system, but I know you've been waiting for a long time, and we're live.
That's wonderful. And I think that system will help with our economic development.
Yeah.
Or it should, unless it's not correct, it could be. It should.
Any other questions? Are we ready to move on? Dave, take it away.
Okay,
I'm ready.
page 58, the new Planning and Community Development Department. And I'm noticed here on that summary page, again, it's not comparable because we divided two up into new sub-departments. The salaries in this Community and Development Department budget are down $600,000. So you'll see this overall is down
There it is.
28%. So there you go.
Okay.
With that though, Tom Brown is on the meeting. If you want to have any questions for him, or Tom, if you want to add anything to the division of the budgets.
Well, Tom, congratulations, since I know this has been something you've been trying to bring forward for a very long time. So I mentioned Heather, but congratulations to you.
Heather, yeah, and Jennifer Thompson worked very
And
hard on
Jennifer.
this, including a lot of support from Brandon's staff and IS&T. The budget, as you just heard, it was a probably more complicated than usual effort in that we are going through a reorganization at the same time we were putting together the budget. You heard from Vivian and both from Eric and Dave, we moved building permits, building inspections, and commercial plan review out of planning and community development. The four areas that remain are items that I think you're familiar with seeing on your agenda. Zoning, policy, which is our code word for code changes and comp planning, and then development review, LDP, land disturbance permits, plats and as-builts, and development inspections. That's the field side of the office, tree ordinance, sign ordinance, and residential design standards. We are not asking for any additional staff. And I don't think there's really any other highlights to hit on. I will try to answer any questions that you have.
I'll just mention, Tom, I think you still have your plate full with the growth in population that we're still experiencing, and the interest in constantly in rezoning. So
the items I've historically dedicated my time toward have remained. I historically, a much smaller percentage of my time went to permits and inspections. And so the things I've focused on historically, I'm going to continue to have to keep track of.
Commissioner Mills, did you
And
have
your
a?
expenses have gone down in all of the expenses. You've had this, over 26% reduction in expenses.
Well, between the reorganization, I think it makes comparing numbers challenging. We didn't add any staff. That's our main expense usually. And we also had the software project that went live, and we had that in our budget. We had been building up a war chest for years to pull off that software project. Now that is financially come and gone.
That's been fantastic, Tom.
Reduction. Thank you.
Tom, how is it working with the inspectors not being under you? You've had COVID, so can you tell?
Right. I think the changes we've experienced related to COVID have been larger and more significant than any changes related to the reorganization. I think from the last few weeks, the obvious thing is we're going to have to really make sure the departments stay in communication. I get a lot of calls where people want to talk about the complete development process. They want to talk about from rezoning all the way through a CO on a building. And we have to know, bring the right people into the meetings, and make sure we can answer questions. So it could be a little more planning to make sure we have the right people at the table now that it's not all in one location, but I think we can do it, and I think we'll do it just fine.
In relation to the comp plan, I know that we've we've been having tree ordinance and mass grading, but what kind of monies are you putting toward the next steps of the comp plan and accomplishing any of those?
Right. It's, and worked with Dave over the last few weeks. We did make a pretty significant reduction in our consulting budget. And that is both for occasional code changes. And I know from direction from the Board of Commissioners, we want to use that sparingly. We want to use that only when it's something we can't pull off at a staff level. But we also historically use that funding for comp plan updates. And we still have the 200,000 in the budget. And with that, I think we'll be in a position to move forward and do what we need to do in 2021.
Do you think that, I mean, I've been putting off forever just because everybody's so busy, but of doing an overlay for 400, you know, do you think we can do that internally like we did before on the Coal Mountain one? Without
Yes,
any?
Well, I do. And I think essentially, I think tomorrow is our first date on the calendar where we're going back to discuss some policy issues with the Board of Commissioners at work sessions and regular meetings. And I'm going to be soon putting back on and reviving our effort to have a quarterly discussion about new projects. You'll see that on one of your work sessions soon. I didn't want to put it on the very first one because we have so many code changes and a backlog of applications I think you need to work through. But I want to soon get that on your agenda. We will revive that effort to talk about all our open projects, and we can look at where that lands and make sure that it's meeting your expectations. It is on the list, though, Commissioner Mills.
Well, even during the COVID thing, you know, Vanessa, Heather, and myself, and some other folks have been working on the conservation zoning. We've had 2 meetings on it. So that part is moving forward.
Yes, it certainly is. Heather Ryan's working hard on that with help from Vanessa. And I think we have, in addition to that, your next, tomorrow's Planning Commission meeting, I think we have 7 or 8 different code changes on that agenda alone. So there's a lot of work coming through. Most of those much simpler than the conservation rewrite. That's going to be a more significant effort, but you're going to see that volume start to show up on your agenda very soon.
Is it affecting your budget, or that it's taking us a long time on the tree ordinance? I know we haven't had any consultants coming to the meeting, but I know, I mean, with COVID, I mean, we're actually doing what the citizens are asking. We're trying to get it right.
Right. Well, as you hit on, we haven't had Eric and his consulting team at those meetings for a while now. And if we need to have additional meetings where our consultants need to attend, we are going to have a discussion about paying them for those additional meetings. Right now, there's an expense in that we're dedicating staff hours to the effort, but it's not pinching me from a budget standpoint, and then I'm not writing checks to a consultant because we are working at a staff level to continue to refine the product that the consultants delivered.
Well, quite frankly, I've been very pleased with Vanessa's input, and I think that as a board, sitting down together, there's been a great deal of progress. Cindy's done a great job in leading that group, and I think we're to a meeting of the minds on a lot of the issues. How do you feel about it, Cindy?
I'm very pleased. I think that if we had went in and voted, we would have made a horrible mistake.
I think so.
You know, that is one, but Molly, thank you for bringing that up, because I do think that we always need to go back and review, like on our building, our design standards. I'm hearing complaints about windows a lot. I can't tell you what it is because I don't know about windows, but I'm being told that what we adopted is getting us an uglier product than what we had before, and that we should look at it. And I heard that from Tom Sharp, and Eric that used to work, that's working at Toll Brothers, that are building nicer houses, and they're saying that what we adopted is getting us an uglier window and an uglier product than what we had before. So I think that we need to build in some way into when we make major changes like design standards and different things, that now that we've had time to look at it, we might need to come back to the board with some changes.
On that, Cindy, I agree with you. And I don't want to spend a lot of your time here, Tom, on this. I'm sidelining a little bit, so I apologize. That's what Commissioner Mills said. On that, what I have seen from the consultants from that particular group, with the tree ordinance as well as with the architectural standards, I don't know that a lot of times that they really know what they're talking about. It doesn't seem to me that there's times when an expert comes in that has really done it, such as a builder, and said, you know, that just can't work. But it didn't seem as though that was something that the consultant, it had dawned on them. I understand even something with the stone. There was a custom builder in one of those meetings that was trying to tell this guy that what's being dictated is not practical, and was explaining from his experience. But so from my standpoint, I really like working with staff and with the two different groups that we're working with on that tree ordinance. I have yet to be impressed with the consulting group, and that's the way I truly. So
We've heard that. We've heard that pretty consistent for almost a year now, and
probably from me.
I think we've gotten some good product, but we are only going back there when it's something we can't pull off at a staff level, either because it's a very technical topic that someone needs to specialize in, or just the volume of public input we really need to rely on some outside help for. Everything else we're trying to take in-house, and this budget is in line with that. It's reducing the consulting budget, anticipating doing more in-house.
You do a better job, Tom. You guys do. Your department does. You do.
Thank you. I'm going to pass along all the kind words. I appreciate that.
2 quick questions. In going through this pandemic, have you been able to see and identify people, I don't know how many people, that maybe could work from home in the future that might give you more space within your very crowded department? And then secondly, what was my second question? Looking at the numbers that we've been talking about with permits, do you think that in planning a budget, are you seeing through your department something of great concern, or maybe some concern that we're on the brink of a recession?
Okay, I think the first one's probably the easier of those two. And I'll say, yeah, we have kind of learned maybe the hard way or learned by necessity. We have a lot of people who can remain productive at home. I'd still want to make a lot of improvements for any kind of long-term relationship like that. I personally feel like I need some better systems to keep track of the work being done and just make sure we can be accountable for all those employees who are working at home. It's a little easier when you can walk out of your office and 10 or 15 paces down the hallway, be standing over someone's shoulder. But overall, we have a lot of people that could work at home, and with the right policies in place, we could free up some space in our office. Where for years, some of those busiest years in 2016, 2017, 2018, we didn't have any office space. Until we opened the new office at West Maple, one of my biggest challenges was we had a demand for more and more services, primarily from the Board of Commissioners. I want to be responsive, but we had no space to put the employees. I think now we can hopefully get the right policies in place countywide to let people work at home, and it is working generally. The IT department has really come through and put us in the position to do almost everything we were doing outside of the paper product and the face-to-face meetings. On permit activity, Commissioner Mills, I know we shared between Vivian and myself, we both sent you some information here earlier today on building permits and land disturbance permits. I saw land disturbance permits slowing down some even prior to COVID. We were seeing a little bit of a slowdown. We saw that last year, and you already hit on that topic when building permits were still under my purview. We know, and it was well publicized, we had a reduction in building permits. So we're continuing to see that. It's hard. I'm not ready to draw conclusions and say I think we're about to enter a recession or not. I don't know that, but I can say that we've seen permits decline, and COVID didn't help anything.
No.
I wish I had more answers there. I'd love to stay here for a half hour and tell you all the answers I had on that. I just don't have them. I can look at the data. I can talk about what we've got in the rearview mirror, but right now trying to predict what's coming in the future is a difficult game.
It is tough. I mean, that's why we're having such a struggle on Finance Committee of trying to figure out where is the sweet spot of not overreacting, but being conservative, in our approach. Did you put money in, I assume, for those people working at home? You and I talked about them needing better equipment at home. I assume you've covered that.
Well, my budget, no, because the budget process was all turned in months ago. So some of the realities we're dealing with today are new, and they all came up since we turned in our budget. I can tell you we're looking to make a shift, and as we replace computers, we're looking to go much heavier on laptops than we have in the past. The employees with laptops were clearly the best position to walk out on short notice and work from home. I have a lot of employees right now that are working on home computers and their personal computers. They're remoting into the county software through that. So we want to, over time, move to more laptops, and that's probably the biggest resource. And then after that, it's more minor issues, making sure people have. I don't see us paying for home internet access, but employees that have the right internet access, giving them the hardware they have to then get into the system.
That probably will need to be adjusted, don't you think, Eric?
Yeah, what I was going to say is that Brandon is probably still listening in, but I think we'll deal with that as a countywide issue, because in some cases, we may find that the people that you actually want in the office may be people with laptops, and the people that can effectively work from home may have the desktop. So in some cases, it may be swap out of equipment or supplementing. But I think Brandon is looking, and I can see his name, so I know he's listening. But I think we'll be looking at that countywide to try to figure out how to take advantage of people that on an ongoing basis can work remotely. I suspect that's a lot of our IS&T and GIS folk that may never come back into a county office. Maybe like the school kids to come by and pick up their personal belongings. What do you think, Brandon?
Well, I think we're accounting for it, Commissioner. When we look at our hardware refresh, one of the things that we've done as part of the CART program is put our computing devices on a 4-year refresh cycle. What we may be able to do is extend that out and then replace a lot of the desktops with laptops, because a lot of the software we're using requires less end-user computing power. So we're able to extend the life of that asset, right? So I think from a dollars perspective, I think we can remain whole and then be able to shift a lot more people to laptops if that's what's required.
Good deal. Maybe we won't have to build as many buildings in the future because of this happening.
Any other questions for Tom?
I'm through. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you for everything.
Okay, on this next section, public health and welfare, if the pleases the committee, I think I can just move you down through it quickly to senior services. That's where you want to finish up. But just a word on what's on these areas. Animal services and animal shelter is moved out to a later meeting when Steve's available. Community services is really a very small inactive function right now. It's just a placekeeper budget of a couple $1,000s. And several of these are primarily not-for-profit function. Mental health administration is Avita, and their request was just a couple $1,000s more. Nonprofit funding, we've just repeated for now until the Social Services Committee meets, the same 435,000. Public health administration, same allocation of public health. Public transportation is moved out to a later meeting when Avery is here. And public welfare is the line where we put the funding for defects. So moving past all those, if that's okay.
Dave,
Yes.
one thing that I think you could help us with when you come back on social services
Yes.
is now that we're doing most of that by invoice.
Yep.
I think we saw from the year before that they didn't use near as much of the money. Now that we're doing it that way, that might be a place where we could do a reduction.
Yeah, I agree. We have some available there. I wanted to come back and explain to that committee where we are in that because a lot of those costs have moved over to juvenile court. So you're right. I think we can reduce that 435.
Good.
All right. If the committee is ready, and maybe it's where you want to finish up with senior services, I think Ruthie Brew is on the meeting. And let me move down to page 95.
Thank you.
Hello, Ruthie.
What was that page?
Hi,
Dave?
good afternoon.
Page 95. And let me get my, okay, I'm almost there. You go. Page 95 is the summary. There's no new items requested. The total budget on the expense side is up 2.27%. Operating expenses are actually down 10%. So it's just the salaries and benefits that drive the remaining increase of 2%. And some of the revenues have been adjusted downward based on history. So the revenues are down. It's 7.6%, but that amounts to about $15,000. And with that, if Ruthie has anything she wants to go over, or if the committee has any questions, we're ready.
I don't really have anything much new to tell you. We expect to operate pretty much the same that we did this year. The donations are down for active adults because that's really an unknown. Sometimes we know a bigger donation's coming in, but usually we don't. So we went conservative on that. That was, a big reduction, you'll see. But money comes in unexpectedly. For our other budget, the grant budget, we're up $46,000 this year because that's the generosity that we've gotten during this COVID time for our homebound program. So we really don't know what's going to happen with contributions.
Are there any funds you rely on from the state that's going to be cut significantly that we need to be aware of and plan accordingly?
Actually, we've received additional funds, again, during this COVID crisis through the Families First Act. We've actually received $84,000 more dollars than we were expecting with no match. And that money is good until mid-21 because they're on a different fiscal year than we are. So we're actually up in that area.
But that was federal money, right? That was
Yes.
federal. Is there any state, or do you get any, does all your money come from federal, or does some of it come from state that might be cut with the governor's cut?
There is some state money, but we have not been notified of a cut yet. I know a lot of other organizations have, but we have not.
Y'all need to check into that real closely. That's worrisome. I keep hearing he's cutting everything, but maybe he won't seniors.
Yeah, I heard everything too, Cindy.
Speaking of that, I got an email a minute ago that the Board of Managers with ACCG are going to have Wednesday morning from 9 to 9:30, a call with the governor. So if we could make our finance meeting, either I'll miss the first 30 minutes or we can make finance committee start 30 minutes later.
Yeah, I'd like to hear that call also.
Dave, do we have time to change our public notice?
For Wednesday?
I would think so. Isn't that 24 hours?
Yeah, I'd have to see if they're listening and to see if they've already posted this afternoon or if it's, if they have, I mean, we could convene the meeting and I wonder if we could just recess for 30 minutes until they're done with that call.
Why don't we? Well, let's see if we've already noticed maybe that we can do that.
Yeah.
Commissioners, does that sound reasonable to just?
Yeah, I just want to be, I mean, I definitely don't want to miss that call.
Got it.
Okay, I have just got from staff. They said that we can change the time. They haven't just about to post it.
Good.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Good timing.
So we'll either get it changed or we'll just open it and delay the meeting, but we'll let you know either way.
Yeah, it's only a 30-minute call, and I bet he'll stick to it.
Okay.
Ruthie, y'all have done a great job during all of this. Thank you very much. I know that those seniors really depended upon y'all's services a lot, even more so than ever. Have you, from going through this, do you see things that need changing so you'd be better equipped to go through it next time? Or needs, maybe gaps that we weren't taking care of that we need to, or just any tweaks to programs that would better? I just love learning from going through the fire.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Mills. You know, we stopped doing hot meals and we went to strictly frozens because it was just going to be too difficult and frankly unsafe to bring a hot meal into a home every day. And some people prefer hot meals, but frozens are just a more efficient way. We only have to go once a week. And so that's one change that I would recommend we make is trying to go to all frozens. We take a 5-pack of frozens and a bag of groceries rather than going daily. And of course, we miss not using our volunteers, but most of our volunteers were retirees. They were older. So staff can do it, and they've done a great job. But we look forward to bringing our volunteers back.
Do you coordinate with United Way and other places like the Place, and to know that y'all are not doing the same things, you know, that there's no overlap?
Yes, United Way held a meeting very early, in early March. They were really proactive and they gathered together all of the organizations that were involved in food service in some way. And so we had meetings. They do a weekly update on who is serving who and who has extra of what product. And so United Way is coordinating that.
They're doing a great job.
They do a great job. We were able, some of the Indian population that I had worked with on Chimaya reached out and wanted to take on a project helping people with food or needs. And so Ruth Good got me and her met with them, and they did a campaign, and they told us Friday that they're going to give $10,000 to United Way to help.
That is wonderful. Yeah.
Well, I saw a status from United Way last week, and all those food groups are doing a great job. If one has excess of something that another one needs, then they're just sharing the materials with each other. So you've got a lot of different organizations that are working very well together. That's a nice thing to learn, that you don't know until you get into it whether they're going to have that capability to work so well together. But
there's probably a dozen organizations that are involved in some type of food service to needy folks. It's amazing.
Any other questions? Well, thanks, Ruthie, and thanks for how you've kind of reinvented how you deliver services electronically to people as well as the home meal delivery.
Thank you. We're excited about that. Thanks.
Thank you, Ruthie.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sensing that this might be a point at which the committee might want to stop for the day, I can just summarize what's left on the agenda for future meetings, and committee can decide what you want to do. We're down to, we have 2 departments left under public safety on the agenda. We have 1 department in judicial plus the probate judge. And then we have general government category left, which is mostly our internal functions, about a dozen budgets there, plus tax assessor and the voters registration. After that's the fire fund, and that's about what we have left to go through in the future meeting or meetings starting Wednesday, and we are changing our notice to 9:30 for Wednesday. I just got confirmation of that.
Thank you.
How's that sound? If you want to entertain a motion now, or if we were to keep going, we'd go on to EMA next.
No, I'm kind of burned out. I'm ready to
Yeah.
spend.
My
3.5
legs are not too happy with me here in this chair.
So Wednesday it is, right? Wednesday morning.
Wednesday,
Wednesday at
9:30.
9:30. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Adjourn.
Second.
All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you.